I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of March 30th, 2022. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room.
It's like we're getting ready to go on a cruise.
It's this. I know, but I can't touch it.
Try it again and see if that works.
A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room. And a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you have parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open. No parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, the commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of today's meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Planning Commission action today is final on the following agenda item: 1.3, Special Permit 22004. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City County Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting that was held March 16th, 2022.
So moved. Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Ball.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Minutes are approved, 8-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Shelley to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled at a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Shelley, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, first items on the consent agenda are items 1.1A, Annexation 22004, to annex approximately 35.80 acres, more or less, on property generally located at West Old Cheney Road and Southwest 12th Street, which is associated with 1.1B, change of zone 22006, from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District on property generally located at West Old Cheney Road and Southwest 12th Street. Next item on the consent agenda is Special Permit 1.2, Special Permit 1855A, an amendment to the Country Plaza Special Permit for planned service commercial to adjust the side yard setback from 50 feet to 25 feet on property generally located at South 56th Street and Waltz Road. Next item on the consent agenda is 1.3, Special Permit 22004, to allow for a home-based business to assemble, repair, and or sell custom-made firearms on property generally located at 18101 Princeton Road. This Planning Commission action is final unless appealed to the Lancaster County Board. Again, this is final action on that item. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting these sites to be disclosed?
No.
If there is anyone here wishing to speak on these consent agenda items, please stand and state that item.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second, Ball.
Shelley.
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Rodenberg?
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Motion carried, 8-0.
I will now ask Shelley to call the request for deferral.
We have received written communication on behalf of the applicant requesting a 2-week deferral until the next Planning Commission hearing of item 5.1 preliminary plat 04011A. This would delay public hearing and action to the April 13th, 2022 Planning Commission hearing. Again, this is for preliminary plat 04011A for preliminary plat amendment to show a revised street layout with associated waiver on property generally located at Waterford Estates Drive and Lidwood Lane.
I would move that we defer preliminary plat 04011A for 2 weeks.
Second, Rodenberg.
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Motion carried 8-0.
Is there anyone here today who was planning to speak on that application? No. Okay. We will now proceed to public hearings. Prior to staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If, during your testimony, you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes, then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or to continue the public hearing. Shelley, please call the first public hearing item.
Yes, the public hearing items for today are 4.1A, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 22001, to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County 2050 Comprehensive Plan to revise the future land use map, growth tiers map, and future service limit to include a new commercial area on the east side of Highway 77 near West Pioneers Boulevard on property generally located at Highway 77 and West Pioneers Boulevard. Related item 4.1B, Annexation 21013 to annex approximately 141.46 acres more or less on property generally located at the southeast corner of Highway 77 and West Pioneers Boulevard. And 4.1C, change of zone 21057 from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District PUD Planned Unit Development for the Wilderness Crossing PUD for up to 575 residential units and 30,000 square feet for commercial floor area with adjustments to the zoning and subdivision ordinance regulations on property located at 4575 South First Street and West Pioneers Boulevard. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these applications?
Cindy?
Yes.
I have other business relationships with Manzito, but we have not discussed this item at all.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of these sites to be disclosed?
No. All right.
Andrew Theroff, planning staff, 555 South 10th Street. We do have quite a bit to go through for the staff side of the presentation, so I'm going to talk about the comprehensive plan amendment, and then Ben and Steve are going to talk in more detail about the actual PUD annexation application. So the comprehensive plan amendment is a few different items. Some of them aren't really related to wilderness crossing, some of them are. I am going to quickly walk through the non-wilderness crossing things so we can get to kind of the main topic. There's a few things on this amendment. There's some growth tier changes and then future land use changes. For the growth tier, as part of the comprehensive plan, we do have a growth tiers map that shows the general phasing of when urban infrastructure is going to be provided to rural areas, and then when those areas will probably be annexed. So we do have a few, I would say mostly minor changes to our growth tiers map. So when you're looking at this map, we have, the main thing to look at is we have our tier 1 area, that's everything within 2050, and that's existing, it's the different shades of red. Within that tier 1, we have priority A. So priority A is the immediate development area. That's areas that have urban services today or have approved plans today. Priority B is everything that we expect to have urban services by 2035. And then priority C is 2036 to 2050. So essentially what we've done with this application, is move around some of those growth tiers in fairly minor ways. The most notable thing is Wilderness Park here. It was shown as Tier 2, which is after 2050. We're moving that now into Tier 1. That's not to say we're going to provide urban services or anything to Wilderness Park, but it is acknowledging that Wilderness Park will probably be annexed into the city at some point within the next 30 years. Especially the northern half of the park is going to be completely surrounded by other development in the next few years. Some other changes, this northern part here was shown as Tier 1 Priority C, so that was after 2035. We're changing that to Tier 1 Priority B, which means we expect to have urban services there by 2035 or sometime before 2035. And then there's a couple other minor changes where this spot here has an approved application on it. So once it gets an approved application, it changes to A. So we've changed that to A. And then these areas up here, this is partly Foxtail Meadows and then partly Wilderness Crossing. So Foxtail Meadows has been approved. If Wilderness Crossing has been approved, that area would then move to Priority A. The next piece of this is the future service limit. The future service limit is showing essentially where we expect to have urban services or the city limit by the year 2050. Since we moved Wilderness Park from Tier 2 to Tier 1, it's also been added inside the future service limit. For future land use changes, there's a few here, a couple minor things. One is this spot was acquired by LPS. We're changing that to public. Over here, this is, I guess, kind of adjacent to Foxtail Meadows. This is the sports complex here. Our future land use map is, it's not exact down to the parcel level. It's kind of blobs, we like to call it. We've just refined this blob more to closely match the existing sports complex boundary. This area was approved for residential with Foxtail Meadows. The main thing here related to Wilderness Crossing is the moving of this commercial center from this side of the highway to that side of the highway. Start with the removal of this commercial center. So that's Foxtail Meadows. It was approved earlier this year. On Foxtail Meadows site plan, they showed apartments in that part of their site plan. They did show a small commercial center near the middle of the subdivision. It's about 1.5 acres. Typically, we only show 5+ acres on our future land use map, so we're not actually adding it to the map, but it is shown on the approved site plan. Looking at Wilderness Crossing, they're showing a commercial center generally in this part of their site plan. So something we have in the comp plan is our complete neighborhoods idea or policy, which you're all aware of. So the point of that is as we're developing new neighborhoods, we want to make sure those neighborhoods are complete, as we call them. So that means a mix of housing types and price points, easily accessible neighborhood commercial services, things like parks, schools. Essentially just, we don't want to have neighborhoods that are just, say, all single family or all apartments. We want to have a mix of housing types and uses. So this neighborhood commercial spot here is really important in terms of achieving the complete neighborhood idea. If we look at this neighborhood, on the west side they have the highway, east side they have the park. There's several hundred units proposed in Wilderness Crossing. It's a little bit off the map, but to the north we have some acreages, and then we also have some larger parcels that we're showing for future urban residential. So we can expect there's going to be more units built just to the north there as well. So if we want to see that as an individual neighborhood, something we want to do is we want to have a walkable, bikeable, maybe a short drive, an easily accessible neighborhood commercial center there to serve all of these residents here. So we think adding this commercial center here is really important for making sure that neighborhood is considered to be complete. That's the comp plan amendment. I do also want to touch on some comp plan conformance things with Wilderness Crossing, just because we got a lot of comments about that. So I'll start out by just saying probably the highest level of comp plan conformance that we're looking at is really just the future land use map. And you can see it's currently shown as urban density residential on the future land use map. It's actually been shown as urban density residential since 2002. So we're coming up on 20 years of this area being shown as urban density residential. The application is for an urban density residential neighborhood. So at that level, it aligns perfectly with what we're showing. We did get several comments, though, about environmental concerns and citing the comp plan for that. I'll show kind of a zoomed out map of the area. Right here is what we're talking about. So the comp plan does talk a lot about environmental concerns, resiliency, sustainability. That was a huge new thing we added to the plan. I think a great example of how that was integrated into the plan was 9 Mile Prairie, Northwest Lincoln. We added a significant amount of environmental resources land to that part of Lincoln to demonstrate that we're not expecting urban development for the areas right around the prairie. Here in the Wilderness Park area, you can see that this dark green here is all shown as environmental resources on the future land use map, which means it will not be developed for urban uses. We're preserving Wilderness Park for its environmental and recreational features. Something not shown on here and something not discussed in the comp plan is an additional buffer beyond that around Wilderness Park to prevent development. I think if we look on the east side of Wilderness Park, we see a really good example of recent development patterns. And when I say recent, I mean the last 2-3 decades. Just on the east side of Wilderness Park, we have a railroad, we have an industrial land, we have urban residential land, we have a school, we have light industrial, we have a golf course with associated urban residential uses. And I think what we've seen is that, we've demonstrated that you can develop urban uses next to Wilderness Park and still preserve what people like about Wilderness Park within the park. So looking on the west side, as I mentioned, we've been showing urban residential here for 20 years. There's no reason to expect that we should change that now or would change that now. So kind of just to wrap this up and keep us on schedule, this Wilderness Crossing development aligns with the comp plan for a few things. One, it's a complete neighborhood. Especially when you bring in that commercial center, it falls right in with that complete neighborhoods concept we talked about. It is outside of what we're showing as environmentally sensitive areas or environmental resources land. It's outside the floodplain. And that's why with the PUD and the annexation, we supported it and said it conformed to the comp plan. And that's why with this comp plan amendment, we're supportive of the commercial area shown in that spot. So I can take questions on any of the comp plan conformance items, and then I'll hand it off to Ben to talk about the Wilderness Crossing site plan and annexation.
Questions?
All right.
Yep, you're ready for you.
Good afternoon, Ben Callahan with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street, Lincoln 68508. This was a combined request with an annexation and change of zone request. Starting off with the annexation area, this area for Wilderness Crossing is located south of West Pioneers and west of South 1st Street. So the area that we'll be talking about for the change of zone is going to be this parcel here. And the city is also initiating the annexation of one single-family property east of South 1st Street, and then 2 properties south, so the Lincoln City Church and a property owned by the State of Nebraska Transportation Department. The total annexation area is 141 acres within this. We felt it was appropriate to annex the additional 3 parcels as water and sewer would be made available to the properties as it extends north from Old Cheney, as well as emergency services within the area and the confusion of what would be within the county along South 1st Street. The change of zone request is to change agriculture land to R3 planned unit development. This would allow for up to 575 residential units and up to 30,000 square feet of commercial area. So shown here is a concept plan provided by the developer. This would be West Pioneers Boulevard and South First Street. One of the main changes within the plan is that they are showing that South First Street would be moved a little bit to the west as it extends south. And this would be the single family property annexed by the city. The three properties, the single family and the church, would not be included within the planned unit development, and their zoning would remain agriculture. Within the development, they are showing three different areas. The southern area is going to follow the R3 single family setup. The middle is allowing for multifamily and single family uses. And then to the north would be commercial, where the 30,000 square feet maximum or multifamily use. One of the main phases of the project would be the completion and improvement of South First Street. That would allow for access to the site. And then once South First Street is built, they would then vacate the original South First Street here, and 33 feet would actually go into Wilderness Park land for access from Parks and Recreation. As you know, there's extensive development here with South 77 or Highway 77 and West Pioneers. The state is still reviewing on how they'd like to proceed with that intersection or overpass. So at this time, the developer is putting a hold here until next year on any development to allow the state to complete their review, which would then proceed into the roundabout and how this will be set up for the commercial. We did work with the developer on a condition that there would be no commercial developed until this second access point could be built. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Dick.
Ben, would you go over again what's going to happen to the existing South First Street?
Yes, so shown here, it's kind of hatched over. That's the original existing South First Street. So within this development, they would be building a new South First Street, and it will slightly curve to the west as it extends, and South First Street would then be vacated and split. So actually a portion of South First Street vacation would go to the developer, and then I believe 33 feet on this vacation would then go to the park.
Got it.
And Parks and Recreation would then use that as an access point to their maintenance.
Thank you.
So to add on to that question, so I saw the change of zone up to the other property below south. So what will happen to First Street below this PUD? Would it continue on?
Correct. It will actually curve back in and connect to the existing First Street here, right in front of the Lincoln City Church.
Why are they moving South First Street like that? Like, what's causing that?
I believe they're wanting to move it further west, and then that would allow them to put residential on the east side, and it actually would be pulling First Street a little further away from Wilderness Park for traffic purposes as well.
That was going to be my question, because this is very preliminary, so you're not really sure what the lots are going to look like, but the plan is to then have houses abutting Wilderness Park versus if the street was there. Whoops, sorry. Got it. I just want to make sure I knew where okay. Any other questions?
Actually, I just have one more, and it's probably your question before. So there is a map of proposed land change that has where the commercial moves from the west to the east. This one, I don't know if you can see it.
On the comprehensive plan?
Yeah. I think yes, CPA 22001, that one. So it says that whole area of the east is urban density, which I believe includes City Church, but for this proposal, it's just for that one northern lot. So trying to figure out the difference between what's shown here and what's in.
So Lincoln City Church is shown as urban residential on the comprehensive plan. For the change of zone request, though, that will just be just this parcel, because here this is the church shown here on the map. So it will just be the portion north of the church is requesting the planned unit development.
Okay, I thought you said agriculture before, that's why.
They're currently zoned agriculture, this parcel and Lincoln City Church.
Okay.
But for
what's
the
being proposed is both to change.
just the parcel north of the church would be within the zoning change to the planned unit development. So this area, and the church would be located south of this area shown here.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll see you in a little while.
Right.
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. So I got selected to do the third part of this, which is to talk about the Wilderness Park sub-area plan, which was prepared in 1999 and approved in 2000. And so I guess I got asked to do that because I was here in 2000. And we'll talk a little bit also then just kind of conclude on the conformance with the comprehensive plan. There's been lots of great questions and comments made in the last couple of days that have come in. The developer and staff have met with the Friends of Wilderness Park twice to try to talk about this plan. And so I hope for the more information that we're able to get out about what is proposed and how that might impact Wilderness Park, I'm hoping that we can start to address some of the concerns and the comments that were brought in. So the Wilderness Park sub-area plan was approved in February of 2000, and Sarah Hartzell with the Parks and Recreation Department is the main staff member who works and has been working extensively a lot with Wilderness Park. While the Wilderness Park, most of it is owned by the county, it is actually maintained by Lincoln City Parks and Recreation Department. So why I think there's a lot of folks here who probably know far more about Wilderness Park than I do, and maybe even Parks and Rec staff, because of their commitment and their volunteer hours there. It is the Parks and Rec staff who are in charge of the maintenance and most recently have been working on the trails plans. We have great new trails markers and have had a lot of public involvement. But so going back to that sub-area plan and talking to Sarah Hartzell, once with all the things that are included in this PUD, Parks and Recreation is recommending approval of it. And even though this sub-area plan is 22 years old now, it is something that they still use and reference. And so the exhibit that I have up here, I'll kind of start with the big picture. This is from figure 6 of the Wilderness Park plan, and it actually has a table that goes along with it. And it shows potential areas of acquisition or management. Management might mean you might get an easement on the property to help manage what happens there, but you don't necessarily own it. But some properties would be owned. And just kind of in the big picture, it starts from the north end up here at Van Dorn all the way down to Saltillo on the south. It identified, as a result of looking at all the various properties around, and again, this was in 2000, what would be the areas that the city or the county together might look at focusing on either to acquire or to get easements. And so at that time, a lot of these properties were adjacent to Wilderness Park on one end or the other. Several of them, such as the ones down here on the south end, just west of Southwest High School, the city did successfully either acquire it or get easements. And so that provided a little bit of buffer in the floodplain area to the east of the park. And so this is something that we have looked at, but not necessarily all of them were acquired. As a matter of fact, Wilderness Ridge Golf Course is in this area here. Just last year, you had the former Prairie Bowman site that's on the east side of Wilderness Park. That was before you for redevelopment. It had residential development approved on that, and that was in this Area 10. So not necessarily all of them have been acquired, but it is something that has been looked at. So let's zoom in here then onto Pioneers. So on this map, we now have Pioneers right here. We have Highway 77. So the area that we are discussing of Wilderness Crossing is right in here between Highway 77 and between First Street. The Area 5 is actually a house that is on the east side that is not part of the PUD. They show a concept plan with what might happen there if that property owner ever decided to redevelop, but they can also happily sit there as a house. That is being kept as a part of the PUD plan. But that is actually shown for acquisition, assuming those people at some point in the future wanted to sell, that might be a good area to acquire. And then the land south of Lincoln City Church, which is in the floodplain, was also another area that was identified for potential acquisition or protection in the future. But the land for wilderness crossing itself was not identified for acquisition or to be a buffer. So we've received a lot of comments about this land should be preserved as a buffer, and even the Wilderness Park Master Plan itself did not show that that was going to be a buffer in the future. There's also a lot of comments about the watershed impact of this development on Wilderness Park. And the applicant can get into the fact that this application did not submit a grading plan, similar to the way you had before you Foxtail Meadows on the west side of Highway 77, did not submit a grading plan. The PUD allows you to come in to get the big concept approved, and then later do an administratively submit the grading plan, the street profiles, the utility details, and you'd have to meet all of the city standards. So when they do submit the grading and drainage plan, it'll have to meet all city standards because no waivers to that are being approved. The only waiver that is in front of you, and I think that's caused a lot of confusion, is a waiver as to when that plan is submitted, so that it would be submitted later, like is done in a lot of other cases. It is not waiving detention on this site. So I'm sorry if that confused people, that it sounded like a waiver of the detention. It is not. It is all going to have to be required. But I put this up here quickly just to kind of show, a lot of comments said, well, this 75 acres, if it, even though it's going to be detained and the water flow will not be greater than it is today, it's going to have a negative impact on the park and will be detrimental to the park, the runoff from this 75 acres. And I think we need to keep in mind that I've really roughly shown where Wilderness Park is on this map. Tens of thousands of acres drain through into the Salt Creek Basin. And most of that drainage, a significant amount, is coming from the south end of Wilderness Park. The area that we're dealing with is just generally here closer toward the northern end. So in a big picture sense, the 75 acres that are first going into detention before they would go into the park is a very small portion of the number of acres that do drain through Wilderness Park. Because it is a very legitimate concern about the change in the channel because of the impact of that water going through the park. I would also quickly then mention a few things, because a lot of the comments talked about the traffic impact on Pioneers Boulevard. And the traffic impact is something that was looked at as a part of the comp plan that was just adopted last year. Mike Eckert, I think, with the applicant, will talk about the traffic study that was done specific to this property. But the city, of course, did a traffic model for the entire community that would look at the impact of all of the development in here going up to the year 2020. Today, when you look at traffic counts on this property, if we get the map back up here. So this is a map coming up very slowly. Here we go. Highway 77 is shown here. This is Pioneers Boulevard. The most recent count was there was about 5,000 trips a day in 2018, which is probably about the same today, on Pioneers Boulevard east of Highway 77. And so some of the concerns that were expressed were, well, once you add more traffic to this, the capacity of the street will be exceeded. In looking at the traffic modeling for this, when you go out to the year 2035, the projected traffic is still only 8,600 trips a day on Pioneers. And that would include a build out of a lot of this development and the development to the west. And it just gets over about 13,000 by the year 2050, or by 30 years from now. And again, that's not just this development, that is all of the development. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of, well, what would be 10,000 cars on a two-lane street? This is Old Cheney Road east of 84th Street, so 84th to 98th. You've got Vintage Heights on the south side, Highmark on the north. That is a two-lane road, and today it has 10,200 cars on it today. So with the improvements that are proposed, you can easily, on a two-lane street, get well over 13,000 trips a day. And I'm now getting a little bit out of my league. You do have Bob Simmering here with LTU, who can go into more details for that. But I want to give people perspective, is it seems like if there's 5,000 trips today on the street, and we're going to be adding 575 dwelling units, that would exceed the capacity of a two-lane street. But actually, even like you think about Pioneers Boulevard west of 48th Street, it has 12,000 cars on it today, and it is just 2+1. So a two-lane road with appropriate turn lanes can handle a significant amount of traffic. And then lastly, the last thing I think we would say on the comprehensive plan is there's a lot of questions about the sustainability of the site, and as Andrew mentioned, and really this is a very efficient use of our infrastructure. This is getting about 7.5 dwelling units per acre. And the way you get sustainability and resiliency is by having an efficient use of the property, that you don't spread out and become low density. If you tried to serve that same 575 dwelling units, well, it's like on acreage development, it would take up 2,000 acres. And so rather than having 2,000 acres in acreage development, where this is an urban development of which you can get a lot more on within just the 75 acres. So we look at an efficient urban development as part of being resilient, as part of being sustainable versus having a lower density, but yet you still want to be appropriate in how that development is done. And when the Parks Department looked at this, and I think the applicant will talk a little bit more about their plans for the east side of their development next to the park, the Parks Department felt like this site allowed for both urban development of this property, but not in a way that was going to negatively impact the park. And specifically, we're looking at people who will still be leaving this development going to the park, either walking along a future trail that would be along the north side of Pioneers Boulevard, or there is a trailhead right at the very southeast tip of this development, an existing trailhead, and you would enter Wilderness Park from there. And we would expect that actually a lot of people who might locate in this neighborhood are locating there because they like Wilderness Park. And that's really what we see as a positive here, is people who have a very short trip. They don't have to drive to Wilderness Park. They can walk into Wilderness Park. They can enjoy it, and join a lot of these folks here who are putting their time and effort into protecting Wilderness Park. So if you have any other questions, that would conclude the staff presentation. I'm sorry it ran longer than normal, but there was an awful lot of questions that were raised, and we wanted to try to address those.
Can you address some of the questions and concerns with the archaeological items and potentially the prairie grass, those types of things that'll be closer to this development?
I will do the best that I can.
That'd be perfect, thank you.
First, I would note that in terms of the comprehensive plan and the items that need to be protected, saline wetlands, saltwort, endangered species, those type of things, none of them are known to be on this site.
Okay.
There was even mention made of a Native American site that is approximately 1,200 feet to the northeast of this site,
Okay.
East of First Street, closer to Salt Creek. So we are not aware of anything that is on this site. There is a sandstone itself, Dakota sandstone, I believe, on this site, but that is not listed as a endangered or something that needs to be necessarily addressed. East of First Street, there is a sandstone outcropping, and I think you'll hear from folks here who know this far better than I do. Adam, when we were meeting with him, gave us a good, excellent amount of information. There's some rare plants that are growing on that. They are, as far as we know, not found on the sandstone west of First Street on this property. But the Parks Department felt like, actually, as long as there is a fence along the east side of this development, and the development team will talk a little bit about how they plan to do that fence, that by moving actually First Street 150 feet west, that was a real positive for the Parks Department. You're not going to have the public traffic going by, the headlights. It has to be urbanized. It would have to be improved. We have to have street lights on a city street. I mean, we need to think about the public driving on them. It would be straight. It would be straight. First Street would be straight for 1 mile. The traffic speeds tend to be a little faster when you have a street that is completely straight. So by bending it through this development and backing up the houses to Wilderness Park and vacating that right-of-way and adding a 33-foot strip, Parks Department, and one of the conditions of this is that all maintenance access be maintained to the park. So the Parks Department can still get in there to get to that prairie, but it's not going to be open to the public. That is an area that is open to the public in the sense of that it is, of course, the public's ownership, but we're not necessarily trying to encourage a bunch of people trampling around it. So the access is maintained. There's a Parks and Recreation maintenance site just south of this house. That access is maintained to the Parks and Recreation facility. And right here on the southeast tip, that is where the trailhead is, where we want the public to enter Wilderness Park. So Parks and Recreation felt like this plan with all of those individual elements did help protect Wilderness Park.
That single dwelling, so it would still retain access to go through to First Street?
Yes, so what is shown here is there would be an extension of their driveway to the new First Street so that they would still be able to come in and out. And actually, one of the positives is by making that First Street, it'll become the First Street, they get to keep their address on First Street versus calling it something else. For the moment, the right-of-way in front of their house could be vacated if they want to join the petition to vacate it, or it would be left right-of-way if they deem that they don't want to have it vacated at this time. But the rest of the right-of-way that is between the county land and this PUD, that would be vacated with 67 feet going to the west and 33 feet to the east. That split is because the 67 feet actually came off the farmland to the west.
So that 33 feet that's being vacated, what are they gonna, so does the city need to do anything with that land? Or
Well,
is that on the developer?
It would
Or is it
technically
staying
be
over?
going over to the county ownership and then being maintained by Parks and Rec. And they may use it as part of the access to that Sandstone Prairie for maintenance access, not public access, as well as access to their own facility south of the house as well.
Thank you.
No questions? Thank you, Steve.
And we'll leave these exhibits up here if the public wants to use them as well.
All right, we'll take testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Anzito, 4400 Lucille Drive, Lincoln, Nebraska 68516. Members of the Planning Commission, I'm here with Danae Kalkowski and Mike Eckert, and we'll be making this presentation together. So we'd like to request a little extra time for our combined presentation, if that's okay. And then we'll just run through the presentation and be available for questions afterwards. Great, thank you. Again, my name is Sam Manzito Jr. I am president of Manzito Construction, Real Estate and Development, and my team and I will be the developers on the Wilderness Crossing project. Currently, the Wilderness Crossing land is privately owned by the Catholic Bishop of Lincoln. I started working with Bishop Conley and the Catholic Diocese of Lincoln in April of 2018 with plans to develop the ground. As member of the Diocese of Lincoln, I've had an interest in putting this property to work for the diocese through the development of the land and at the same time for the benefit of the city of Lincoln and its need for additional housing. My team and I believe that land development is essential for the success of Lincoln and that it's imperative for its prosperity and growth for our community. Development will generate more jobs, desired curb appeal, unite community members, and maintain and increase home values. When you see businesses expanding, new commercial buildings being constructed, and new neighborhoods being built, it signifies a growing community like ours. We understand the responsibility of building next to Wilderness Park and the importance of protecting the park, its wildlife, and its natural attributes. Leading up to this meeting, my team and I have spent time contacting the neighbors of the property and around Wilderness Park by mail, email, and phone. Our first contact with Adam Hintz, the president of the Friends of Wilderness Park, was in October of last year, where I shared with him via phone that we were developing the property and would be in touch as we got closer to submitting our development plans to the city. On March 9th, we met with Adam again and the board of the Friends of Wilderness Park to share with them our development plans. We had additional meetings with Lincoln City Church on March 17th, and shortly thereafter, on March 22nd, we participated in a neighborhood meeting facilitated by Dale Brambilla to share our plans and listen to the concerns of the neighborhood. As recent as Monday, we had a follow-up Zoom with the Friends of Wilderness Park to hear about the results of their board meeting last week. And lastly, we attempted to contact Mrs. Danker's property, which was the property that Steve was identifying in the middle of the development, by handwritten note on February 22nd, but did not receive a response. There were 5 main concerns that came from the meetings with the Friends of Wilderness Park and the neighbors. Those concerns were a concern of light pollution and its impact on the nocturnal animals in Wilderness Park, the potential for stormwater runoff, the creation of an additional buffer between the developed property to ease the transition from the east side of our development to Wilderness Park, a general concern of lots backing to the park and the need for fencing along the east property line to protect the park, and the creation of additional traffic due to more rooftops. Each of these items will be addressed by Danae or Mike during their presentation. My team and I are motivated to maintain a healthy and open relationship with our neighbors while continuing to assist in the growth of Lincoln as described in the comprehensive plan, which includes this property. I have personally read all the letters that have been submitted by private citizens regarding the development of this privately owned property. As a developer, I do want to stress to the Planning Commission today that we will in no way be altering the park land owned by the county to develop this private piece of property. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Mike now. Thanks.
Good afternoon, council members, Planning Commission members, sorry. Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group, 8535 Executive Woods Drive, Suite 100, Lincoln, Nebraska. I will try to get through some of the infrastructure and hydrology items here as quickly as possible. I will put the map back up that Ben and Steve were using to just expand a little bit. I think they both did a very good job of what's going on. When we began the discussions about South First Street, it's a gravel road today. It's classified as a minor arterial, but it's unpaved. And as you all know, the city really does not have the kind of road money that they need for projects where traffic volumes are very high, much less a street like this that you can see has a church on the south, and then you get into floodplain. And so between Pioneers and Old Cheney, this is really the only developable piece. And then when some considerations were given to the impact on the park, primarily, as Steve mentioned, high-speed traffic, as well as then much more intense lighting that is required on arterial streets, it was decided that it would probably be beneficial for everybody to shift it over and begin to wind it internally into the subdivision. We are going to plant a couple breaks in it so that it does calm traffic speeds, but that we would back up residential lots to those areas. Steve discussed the vacation of the right-of-way that would become part of those lots. And so what we have also agreed to do we did make those lots extra deep, just anticipating creating as much distance as we could between the relocated First Street and what is today more or less the center of the gravel. But since they were deeper, we are willing to create a 10-foot outlot on the east side of those lots that would be owned by the homeowners association. There would be a fence on it and some berming with some landscaping. And so a 6-foot high wood fence the entire stretch. And again, it would be controlled by the association. So individual homeowners would not be inclined to take it down per se. That was an important element for Parks and Rec. And so we've agreed to do that. The other thing I wanted to cover in it again real quickly is the trailhead here will still have access. This road is anticipated to tie back into the gravel section right here. Parks and Rec has a maintenance facility right here. We'll be required to provide them access. The Danker property here, as he discussed, will be required to provide them access. And we'll also be providing access for Parks and Rec up here on the north end before the lots start for some maintenance that they need on the Sandstone Bluff area to be able to do, because it is very difficult to get to that location from their facility on the south, particularly if there's high water event. Secondly, then, as Steve mentioned, we will go through the full grading and hydrology process that must be reviewed and approved by Watershed Management. The same standards that every subdivision in the city of Lincoln has are increased runoff from what is there today to what it'll be in the urban environment will need to be detained in a series of detention cells and dispersed slowly over 72 hours. We will have cells generally located here, here, and the majority of the one here, as most of the land from about right here breaks to the south. And so this will retain water, disperse it slowly, versus today during a high event, it simply flows right into the park, right into the First Street right away, drains down actually down here to a location and then goes into the park. So that is a process we do by administratively. That was part of the conditions of this. As Steve mentioned, that we will have to come back and do that to the satisfaction of Watershed Department. The other thing that I did want to extrapolate on a little bit more, I created this map last night as I started looking at this is from the 2014 South Salt Creek Watershed Basin Study. And it may be hard to see even as I zoom in, but there's a green dot right there. That is the 75 acres of this development. I drew in this blue boundary that goes over actually into Saline County, touches Gage County, comes up just north of Beatrice, goes over to Highway 34, comes up to Highway 2, and then kind of meanders through a lot of the existing development in town. This was in 2014, but this area all here is developed. All of that area, which is 142,000 acres, drains to Wilderness Park adjacent to this project. And so I wanted to give some perspective when we talk about the impact of 75 acres on the park in relation to the impact of 142,000 acres on the park, most of which is ag land, but it is a tremendously large basin that I wanted to make sure you had a better frame of reference on, in that when you drive from here to Beatrice, virtually everything you see on either side of Highway 77 drains to this, and ironically comes to a point right here, and then we have other basins north, but that there's a lot of runoff coming into the area. But we will do what is required by us by code on our property in terms of retaining the stormwater runoff. I also want to remind you that in 2016, we adopted water quality standards that have to be integrated into our detention cells, which are basically a series of impervious soils that allow the first flush contaminants off of the roads and other things to be soaked into the soil so that they don't pass through. And so we have to meet that standard also. On traffic, I think Steve summed it up very well. This is a 122-page traffic study that was submitted to Lincoln Transportation and Utilities that demonstrates the level of service at our intersections in the interim condition and the full build-out condition. They are all functioning at a level service of A. As Steve mentioned, if you look at the overall volumes, even projected out further, we're well below. A two-lane road will break down somewhere between 20 to 25,000 vehicles a day, and we're going to be half of that under full build-out. And so LTU has had a chance to review it. We have received no comments. Our understanding is they feel like everything that we've demonstrated is sufficient. The traffic study would not even been required had we not had some portion of commercial planned for the property. And that commercial area is probably going to be very small. The commercial area is really a B2 neighborhood business district. We maybe have some office, a convenience store. I don't think Sam feels like there's any potential that thing is going to be very big. At the end of the day, it may not be there at all. It may be all single family and multifamily. With that, I'll just wrap up by saying from a design perspective, we are in agreement with all the conditions that staff has put on this project for us to get this phase of the PUD approved, and we're willing to make all the adjustments they requested. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we'll wait till Danae's done.
One last segment. Danae Kalkowski, 1128 Lincoln Mall, Suite 105, Lincoln, Nebraska 68508. So I'm going to just wrap up on a couple of those additional concerns that Sam mentioned that we heard from the Friends of Wilderness Park and the neighbors to the north, specifically about light and noise pollution from this residential development into Wilderness Park. The developers of Wilderness Crossing are committed to creating a neighborhood here that is sensitive to these potential impacts to the park. I think Mike's already talked about some of what they're willing to do. In order to mitigate light and noise pollution, they'll be placing that 10-foot outlot along the east side of the property, adjacent to Wilderness Park or adjacent to the right-of-way that's going to be dedicated back to the county. In that outlot, we'll be constructing a 6-foot-high privacy fence that will be consistent down the entire length of that boundary. That then leaves the 10 feet to the, we're going to be putting that right on the property line between the back of the lots and that 10-foot outlot. So then that leaves that eastern 10 feet of the outlot for them to place some additional trees and potential berming, some other things that would potentially mitigate light and noise through that area. As Mike also mentioned, the outlot and the fence will both be owned by the homeowners association. And we think that's important because it gives, number one, continuity to maintenance of that along there. And then, as Mike mentioned, it doesn't allow any neighbor to come in and take out the fence. It's not their private fence, it's the association's fence. In addition, the developers researched some potential options for placing lighting restrictions within the private covenants that will be filed against all the lots within this development to kind of further minimize potential light pollution from the development. And so just a quick refresher, most of you are familiar, but on covenants, once a development is final platted, developer typically prepares and files a set of private covenants on the property. Those typically contain like standards for what kind of buildings can be built. For example, it might have a minimum size of home. It might have some requirements for facade. It also usually has restrictions for the types of activities that can happen in that development. And all of those are put in place in order to protect the investment that homeowners are making, so that everything stays somewhat consistent and protects all of that money that they're putting into their home and their property. They also provide these covenants for the establishment of a homeowners association. And typically then they say by means of just becoming a lot owner, you become a member of the association. And usually two main things that association does: maintains the common areas that are beneficial to the entire development, like those outlots or those detention cells Mike's mentioning. The association usually owns and then maintains those, charges that back to the homeowners, and then also enforces the covenants. It's a mechanism for enforcing the covenants. So when we say we're looking at some restrictions that we can put in the covenants that would help with additional potential light pollution, we're saying we're going to put something in that document that gets filed of record and stays with the property. So even though the property may turn over and sell to somebody else, that covenant, stays with it. So in their research for potential lighting restrictions, the developers found the website from the International Dark Sky Association, which has some great ideas and examples for steps that can be taken to minimize light pollution in neighborhoods. This website is also known by the Friends of Wilderness Park, because when we mentioned it to them on our call Monday morning, they said, great, that would be probably one resource that we would have pointed you toward to look at. So based upon kind of what we found there, and to support the principles that are promoted by the International Dark Sky Association for what they would call responsible outdoor lighting, the developers are committing to place language in the wilderness crossing covenants that, number one, will require the lot owners to use shielded light fixtures that shield the light sources, minimizing glare and light trespass from the property and onto others. We'll also be able to provide lot owners examples of acceptable and non-acceptable fixtures right from that website, because they've got a lot of great information there. The covenants are also going to require the use of LED lighting that has a color temperature of less than 3,000 kelvins. And what that does is minimize the blue light emissions from the light. And those are the emissions that we're concerned with because they're the ones that brighten up that night sky and can be found to be harmful. So creating the outlot, installing the fence and trees, placing these requirements within the covenants, I think show the developer's commitment to mitigating impacts to Wilderness Park and establishing neighborhood standards early in the development. I think, number one, will give the association better power of enforcement while people are building their homes and installing their lighting and lighting fixtures. And then I think by just having that in the covenant, it also creates the neighborhood effect, the peer pressure effect of neighbors saying, hey, this is what our neighborhood's about. We should all be complying with these things as a protection for not only our neighborhood, but also our neighboring wilderness park. So I think in conclusion, I think between my presentation, Mike and Sam's, we're just asking for your support for all of these actions. And all three of us would be happy to answer any questions you might have. You can bring them up if you need them.
Questions at this point, or we're gonna
None
wait
at
till
this point.
after?
Not yet.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Stick around. All right, we will now have testimony in support. Go ahead and come forward if you have testimony in support.
My name is Dustin Sutter. I'm the executive pastor at Lincoln City Church, 5001 South First Street. I brought along with me today Dr. Jake Kirkland as well. He's representing the church with us as well today. Just wanted to say that Lincoln City Church, really, we've been as an entity in Lincoln for around 32 years now, in our current location for over 20 years. And really our congregation is 300 plus, and really it's a diverse congregation, I guess you could say, in all manners of the word. We think about those who come and attend the church. We have very blue-collar folks. We have business owners within the city of Lincoln, as well as university lecturers, professors, and such. So we feel like we cover a large group of people within the city. And to be honest, being there, we've been looking forward to see what's going to happen to the north of our property. We've heard many things over the years. And knowing that the Catholic Church had bought it, I think to originally purpose it for, I believe, a high school, and now moving on to a development. And we're really here to say that for that, we're in favor of the development. We're fine with that. We've had, again, as Sam and Ben came by and we had a conversation with them. But that being said, on the annexation side, we do have a few concerns from our property. And so we'd like to say that really over the years, First Street has been kind of a contentious thing for us, trying to get in and out of that street. When we first moved in, First Street was really in bad shape. And whenever it rained, you could not access our property from the south. And so we used to have to sit down on Old Cheney and direct people around. Otherwise, if you didn't have a good 4x4, you weren't making it to church that day, and your car would probably be there for a couple of days. But what I would say has been great, I just really want to thank the commissioners too in the county level. They have done an amazing job out there. Some years back, we sold a portion of the land off so that the street could be widened in preparation actually for paving. For many years, we were, I believe, on the 1 and 6 plan to be paved. As a few traffic studies, I feel like numbers maybe changed a little, but as the traffic studies went on, it was not something then that continued to stay on that plan, so it kind of fell off. But I would say, though, that they have done an excellent job at upkeep with the road that's actually been there. They're out there quite often to make sure that the road is graded for us. Sunday mornings, obviously, are kind of our big day for the week. And when we get a big snow on Saturday, there's always someone out there to beat us out there so that First Street is cleared. And so for us, that's a very, very big thing. One of the things that does concern us just a little bit there is knowing that going forward, the remainder of that street, from what we've been told, is to remain dirt. That bothers us just a little bit, and the fact that we know there is going to be a lot more traffic. I know there's been traffic studies done, but based on what we've seen and knowing some of the other things going on around, we feel like that section of First Street that remains from our property to the south is going to incur a lot more traffic than what is seen right now. Bringing in that many housing units in that area, that's going to bring a lot of cars as well down that street, which just means a lot of in and out on a day-to-day basis, which it is not necessarily getting now. There are a few businesses around us that bring large trucks. They have some big dump trucks and such that will come down that street, and so we know that will be additional to those, which could very well bring that kind of traffic. Our understanding has been that the state has looked at, again, in the traffic studies, and I know Ben you said that the state was looking again at that whole plan in that area, but our last understanding is that Old Cheney itself was going to be closed right there to the west of First Street. Well, there's an awful lot of traffic as we see it, and you can see even on the traffic study, it says there's nearly 13,000 trips a day on that road. They're going to have to go somewhere. I know if I was coming from the north, I myself probably would not take the long way around to get back to Old Cheney. I would find my way through the quickest way, which is going to be Pioneers and down that First Street Road. There are neighborhoods back in there, and actually Dr. Kirkland lives in that neighborhood just around the corner from us as well. And he would have to probably do the same thing to get out, would be to come back up First Street and to cut out at Pioneers. Thank you. For us, really those people that are going to be living there, the surrounding area down Pioneers doesn't offer a lot. So I would think a lot of the folks in that neighborhood are going to find their way south and back out the Old Cheney area. If you drive down Pioneers, you do have the state pen over there. You've got some you've got some other industrial type over there. But as it comes to restaurants, as it comes to shopping, schools, libraries, gyms, all of that is to our south. And so I would see at a daily basis many trips being made out of that neighborhood to come down. And that's where, for us, we have a concern with First Street on that as it comes to annexation and as to what level of service that we're actually going to get on First Street with that being gravel, and having been told already that it's not going to be considered a primary street. But for us, it's very much a concern because it is going to take more traffic. So thank you.
Questions?
I do.
Thank you. Oh, yep, sorry, Dick has
Have
one.
you had any discussions with transportation and utilities on paving that section?
We did, so as a part of the meeting with Manzito, and again, Ben was there, we got an email back basically saying that at this time, there are no plans to pave that road, and it may be a long ways out, if ever, that would actually get paved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any other testimony in support? All right. What about neutral testimony on this application? Okay, seeing none, we will proceed to testimony in opposition.
All righty. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Hintz, 1919 Prospect Street. Speaking on behalf of Friends of Wilderness Park in these comments, I would like to speak later on my own behalf in separate comments. To whom it may concern, Friends of Wilderness Park, a local nonprofit organization dedicated to the protection of Wilderness Park, is in opposition to the change of zone number 21057. The reasons are as follows. While we understand the comprehensive plan encourages higher density residential business developments to control urban sprawl, we don't believe the comprehensive plan's goals of environmental stewardship and sustainability, Goal 7 in the comprehensive plan, healthy, active, and healthy, active, and connected people, Goal number G6, or community resiliency, Goal G8, were considered enough relating to the zone change right next to Wilderness Park. Unfortunately, these goals are not mentioned in the staff report. Now and in the future, we would like to see any change of zone next to Wilderness Park and or the Salt Valley Greenway heavily consider these goals. If the goals are not met, Friends of Wilderness Park must be in opposition. Policies related to goals G6, G7, and G8, and these goals are in the comprehensive plan, in the plan forward. I don't know how that works.
Wait for a second.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Now you can.
These are just examples of the goals. And then here's the policies. Policies related to goals G6, G7, and G8 include conservation design, native prairie, ecology and habitat, floodplains and riparian areas, green corridors, environmental resource protection, open space and development, and watershed planning. All of these policies have relation to Wilderness Park and how the city, county plans to protect the park through well-designed and appropriately placed development. Again, the fact that these goals are not mentioned at all in the staff reports is our main reason for opposition. The prospective zone change is directly west of a rare sandstone prairie. Friends of Wilderness Park and Lincoln Parks and Recreation have invested resources to keep this ecotype healthy and promote its continued existence. There are plant species that live in this prairie which exist nowhere else in the park or the city's park system. Specifically, wild prickly pear cactus, which needs the sandstone prairie to thrive. The fact that this rare ecotype is so close to the area in question is the reason Friends of Wilderness Park is so opposed to the zone change. Finally, we do not recommend approval of waiver number 1 for information regarding grading, drainage, and stormwater detention. The Salt Creek this right here. The Salt Creek is in close proximity to the land in question. We would prefer these plans be available before any change of zone would be considered. For 50 years, Wilderness Park has given residents a place to experience the natural beauty of the Salt Creek watershed and help us develop a sense of place. It has protected us from flooding through wise land use and planning. It's now time for Lincoln to follow its policies and protect Wilderness Park. Sincerely, the Friends of Wilderness Park Board.
It's for Adam.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. In looking at some of the items from the Wilderness Park Board, the master plan that you completed in 21, how does this work with your master plan? You have some projects identified?
Okay. So the master plan would be more of a city parks question instead of a Friends of Wilderness Park question. So, and if you want to delay the vote until you get that question answered, that'd be totally fine by me. Could you ask the question again and see if I can maybe answer it the best of my ability?
Now, the Wilderness Park Master Plan, it had the master plan goals for the park, and then it identified, about 10-ish types of project lists that are in the top 10.
Gotcha.
And so I noticed that on the map, there was one at the trailhead that is by this development. And I was just wondering if there was anything that came up when you started your discussions with the developer or the city, and that could have been helpful for the master plan where you're currently implementing.
Okay, so with the master plan, a lot of those are improvements to the park that make the park a lot more user-friendly. We're a part of this very large campaign right now, partnering with the Lincoln Parks Foundation, a $2.1 million effort to make sure that we have signage, maps, kiosks at every trailhead. We're also restoring or replacing bridges. We have trail markers now in the park. These are all things that have happened within the past year. The city has taken a lot of investment into Wilderness Park to make it an incredibly user-friendly park. So the master plan for Wilderness Park focuses a lot on those things, making it user-friendly. And so the improvement in that one trailhead down there to the southeast, that is a trailhead that now has a kiosk, now has information about the area. The rare sandstone prairie just north of there, I cannot stress how incredibly important it is because Wilderness Park is a cradle of biodiversity, and the fact that it has this prickly pear cactus, this wild parsnip, and also a type of penstemon that grows there, shows our natural legacy and what has been here historically for thousands of years. So it's one of the main reasons why we're so sensitive to this development, is because it's so close to this very special ecotype. And the trailhead that's just south of the park is very close to that. And it's a place to be celebrated and protected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Rosina Paolini. I'm not with the Friends of Wilderness Park, though I have been. I'm not with Parks, but I think I can answer a little bit of your question also. I'm at 1850 Dakota Street here in Lincoln. So the word covenants, blur, like, sorry, but for me, I love my neighborhood association. The top 10, some of the projects that they're looking at, if I may answer your question, they're looking at a lot of storm drainage issues. And I'll highlight those and then come back to more on that. So we have what I call the Dumb Doe crossing, because in what time there was actually a dumb doe standing there when Parks and Recs was figuring out what to do with a creek crossing. The water is so high and with such a volume that they're now putting in either 2 or 3 big culverts or big square culvert. They haven't decided because what we have is not working under the current NRD plan. And that's the current NRD plan, right, that was done in 21. Yes, I'm nervous because as people are talking about home ownership, like this is my second home. So we're going to talk a little bit about the historical that they did. I don't want to repeat because you have a long day. Yes, sandstone cap. This area actually acts as an easement because there is no impervious surface, none. The cap on the top of the hill, is the only real rock there. Everything soaks up like a sponge, okay? So, like, I've been going to the park since I was 10. I'm 61. But I've been really involved with the park the last 40 years, both in trail maintenance. I do a lot of drainage issues. So when I talk about engineering, I kind of have my feet on the ground with a group of people. That water comes off the sandstone cap on both sides of the road like a rush of water. I've been riding my bicycle in there and had to bail. It's coming so fast. Okay, that's today. That's in 2014. I forgot my pictures, but I can send them to you. So that's today, where we have such rushes that is moving. We're needing to replace 3 bridges. So that's one of the main infrastructure expenses in the 10-year plan for Parks and Recs. I organize Run for the Bridges. We've replaced 3 of them. We've got a creek crossing in the works, though the engineers didn't, follow. They didn't spend enough time in the area to understand the rush of the flow at the 14th Street Creek crossing. So $15,000 is going to get respent doing it correctly. But there is such a rush also of water at the 14th Street Creek crossing. So when you look at the terrain from First and Pioneer, the water rushes all the way down across, basically past First Street, right, down into the creek. It just dumps into the creek, even with that nice buffer that's soaking something up, okay? This is just my experience. I, in 2014-15, was in that park any day I had off and every weekend until August. We literally had rakes, McLeods, raking stuff off the trail, redoing drainage ditches, trying to redo a couple of creek crossings to make the trail passable. It was closed by the city. So I got a minute. Housing issues, affordable housing, $80,000 a lot. Mixed housing, great. Is it affordable or subsidized? Just a concern. Fencing at the covenant's person's discretion. So basically what I'm saying is we need to stop the waiver, make sure everything is complete for a really sound development if it's going to happen. That's a challenge because we have water already at a 2015 flood, not meeting the 21 standards for the NRD, for the climate change plan, right? So what's going to happen when we add all of that impervious surface at the top of the hill? Well, you remember 2014-15, the parking lot of Southwest High School? How long did it sit underwater? I'm really serious, because the water came down from Walt Library, rushing down into the parking lot, filled the parking up, I think, for 3 weeks. I'm not even addressing the dead deer that are going to be in the back of people's backyards, because that's what I see on Highway 77 when I'm going down the road, right? Because it's all coming from the west. It has for years. It's that traffic. See, traffic's a theme. So animal traffic, water traffic, car traffic, it just is this theme that really says, great idea for a project, maybe in the wrong place. Thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate your time. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who has the list of speakers?
Should be on the back.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Are we supposed to stay in order or
Are
just
we
get
supposed
up?
to stay in order?
No, you don't need to stay in order.
Let's just keep moving.
Good afternoon. I can take it. Thank you. Good afternoon. Hello, my name is Stephanie Walker. I am at 3801 South First Street, a resident. In all, I am a resident of 22 years on South First Street. I also represent my mother-in-law, who is unable to join us today, in addition to multiple friends who are opposed to this. I do understand that there is multiple waivers on the Wilderness Crossing Plan Unit Development, CZ 21013. So I do want to address that. I know the comment was made earlier that there isn't truly a waiver being presented on this, but the way I do read it, there is definitely waivers being requested. So thank you for the opportunity for a public hearing so that we, the people who know, understand, respect, and are gravely concerned about the future result of the rezoning the southwest section of Southwest First, and Pioneers Boulevard from an agricultural district to a residential district may communicate our concerns. It is my understanding that the developers, Manzito Brothers, are choosing to create a rather large development in a highly sensitive natural area without first taking the appropriate steps to ensure that grading, paving, and building upon the buffer zone to Wilderness Park, a well-known and key area that supports the flood control for the city of Lincoln, is a safe and feasible addition to Lincoln. The developers have requested multiple waivers for their project, yet I would like to take a moment to focus on the main waiver of concern, that of Municipal Code 26.15.020, the information on or accompanying a preliminary plat. Due to the high risk of overpopulating and congesting the roadways that stretch between a dangerous highway intersection, Highway 77 and Pioneers Boulevard, and me and all my neighbors know that when you get a green light at that highway, you don't go. You look, and then you go. And I am concerned that 575 new neighbors will not know that. So due to the high risk and congestion of the roadways that stretch between a dangerous highway, as I stated, and a highly used railway where there are trains stopped daily. I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of sitting at a train there or turning around and then getting in the turning lane on Van Dorn to try to get to where you're going. It is very, very complicated, very time consuming. Highly used railway, and I find it detrimental to the safety of those who will reside and travel through the area that Municipal Code 26.15.020 not be waived. I understand the need to develop multiple small pockets of Lincoln so that we can achieve our growth goals as a city. However, after attending the meeting with Manzito Brothers, and thank you very much, after attending that meeting on March 22nd, it is clear that the understanding of the area has not been achieved by them. nor has an in-depth study of the area taken place prior to, as they have stated, 95% of their plans being made for this plat. They are ready to break ground in the fall, and I don't think the studies have been put in place in order for that to safely happen. The area in question is not like other developable pockets in and around Lincoln. We cannot allow our desires to get ahead of what is prudent to keep Lincoln a welcoming and resilient city. I implore you to not grant the waivers being requested at this time and to deny the entire rezoning request of CZ 21057. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, thanks.
Thank you for inviting us all here and letting us speak. My name is Kathleen Danker. I own a property at 4700 South First Street. It's an acreage of about 2 2/4 acres, and it was, and of course, and there is Wilderness Park on the north and the east and the south, being the maintenance building. The property has been there since before 1910, and I have owned it now for 42 years, since 1980, and it was grandfathered into Wilderness Park. That's why it's there, cutting into Wilderness Park, because it was there long before Wilderness Park. And so to the west of us was Snell's Dairy Farm, across First Street there. And I still think of it as Snell's Dairy Farm, even though the old Snells have died and the house was moved and the dairy barn was torn down. I did send a letter to the commission, and I got a notice that letter went through, but I also sent photographs, and I'm not sure that they did. I got some message that some things did not get through. Did you get photographs?
Yes.
But I do have those photographs here on my phone, and I'd like to show them. I imagine the showing of photographs will take me over my time limit, so I'd like permission to show some of these photographs.
Yeah, let's go ahead and sign them. We haven't even gotten to 4 minutes yet, so if you have those and you'd like to put them up on there, that'd be great.
Yeah, and it might take a little time. It appears that the annexation of my property into the city will cost me thousands of dollars in additional taxes and in the charges for hookup to the sewer system. I hope not to have to hook up the water system because we have a fine well. I strongly, but that cost, I've always sort of figured that we'd get annexed into the city at some point. I'm much more distressed about the other propositional changes. I strongly oppose the proposed zone change from agriculture to residential, especially high-density urban and commercial development on the Snell's old property. The related tier changes, the moving of First Street from its current position, and the project in general. I oppose these proposed changes because they will result in irreversible environmental destruction of a unique and ecologically significant landscape that should be preserved for Lincoln and Lancaster County, the present and future citizens of Lincoln and Lancaster County, and the wild plants and animals that inhabit it. Ultimately, it would destroy a unique vista overlooking Wilderness Park and parts of the city and county. The house where the Snells lived was located on the top of a hill of Dakota sandstone looking down on its east side. It looks down on all sides. It's the highest point for miles and miles around, unless you want to go up to the cemetery of the penitentiary. I imagine there's a good view from there, but few have seen it. Outcroppings of Dakota sandstone are not common in Lancaster County, though some can be seen at the zoo in Lincoln. The Snell's Hilltop provides a unique vista of an extensive stretch of wilderness park to the east and southeast, as well as long-distant views of the city and of the county in places to the south as far as Sotillo Road, to the east beyond 14th Street, to the northeast including the Capitol Building, and to the Yankee Hill neighborhood on the northwest. And I'd like to show you photographs in a minute. This hill should be preserved and ultimately made available for the enjoyment of the public, not leveled to create an urban density subdivision. Few of the wild animals and birds that live in Wilderness Park pay attention to its legal borders. They freely cross First Street back and forth from the Snell's old land. Deer and flocks of turkeys do this all the time. We've also seen foxes, raccoons, coyotes over there. Great horned owls perch in the trees up on top of the hill. Can I have a little more time?
Have a little bit more time, but we have a lot of people want to testify, so.
Okay. Bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, and turkey vultures fly overhead. In spring, after it rains, chorus frogs start burbling from an intermittent pond up there on the Snell's property, the Snell's old property. I know of no intact remnant of tallgrass prairie there, but clumps of individual native plants like little bluestem can be found. And there are, it's already been talked about the goals in the Plan Forward plan, and in some things, and I've got a bunch of them here, but to read it, I'd just say, here's element 4 of environmental resources. Signature landscapes are those areas and natural features that are unique to a region and contribute to the identity of the community. The Lincoln and Lancaster County community's landscape is primarily shaped by Salt Creek and its tributaries, and the natural features in it include riparian floodplain areas, etc.
And those, your elements are in the letter, and I did, and the photos are in the letter.
Did the
online.
photos turn up too?
We do have all of them. Yep.
Yes, we do.
So if there's a comment you'd like to make about the photos, I don't know that we need to show all of them because they are on here, but maybe
I
you
just
could
want
do
to
that.
say that in the Green Print Challenge, which is still being considered for plans, including the Plan Forward, it says, views and vistas are significant views to important or unique natural resources, places, structures, landmarks, etc. These views can be from afar or nearby. Vistas refer to areas that afford significant views. Vistas tie together natural features, urban features, and cultural features into one significant view. And then they have a human impact threat thing where they say development can remove vistas. And so, I'm going to see if, whoops, if I can figure out.
No, that we can see the pictures.
We're good.
Yeah.
I'd like to make it bigger. I mean,
It's down on the base.
We're down here.
Go.
Okay, this is a view from the top of the Snell's Hill, looking down over Wilderness Park and off into the city. This view is to the east, basically, yes. There's another view of it to the east. Now, this view is to the northeast. And I must admit that this picture was slightly zoomed. This is less zoomed here, so it is a little farther away, but you can definitely see the Capitol building. This is over close to 14th Street, the building. This is north, west and a little north to the Yankee Hill neighborhood down there. This is looking southwest. I've got some more pictures. This is straight south. As I said,
it's time.
Yep, that's probably time. Do you have a closing?
Just that, this is where the bald eagles perch up on top of their hill. Not the bald eagles, the great horned owls. This is the pond when it fills up. It's a great place to view clouds. This is east, and you can see down across First Street here the sandstone outcroppings. They're the same part of the hill that the top of it is the Snell's land. This stuff, you can see, got sort of flattened, and that's because in the early 20th century they cored the rock, the sandstone. That didn't happen on the Snell's property. That's why the prickly pear cactus and stuff are in the park property, because you had to uncover the sandstone before, and the dirt on top of it. But I will stop there and just say that that I understand it's an important goal of the Planning Committee to provide for symmetrical and balanced growth of the city, but it is entirely wrong and irresponsible to facilitate a large urban housing development right beside Wilderness Park. It's equally wrong to allow the tallest hill, the only vista overlooking Salt Creek, Wilderness Park, and this area of the city and county to be graded away to build houses, eliminating the possibility that it could ever become an ecologically intact public landmark. Surely there is some other flatter area in West Lincoln, farther away from Salt Creek, on which to build a high-density urban housing and commercial development where it would not have such an impact so detrimental to the environment. Thank you, and I'm sorry for running over.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
Oh, yes, questions?
No, okay, thank you.
Thank
I just
you.
want to make sure thank you.
Just want to say thank you to everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules and being here today. My name's Dale Brambilla. I'm a resident at 4111 Southwest 2nd Street and Pioneers Boulevard. As a resident of Lancaster County for over 35 years and a homeowner on Southwest 2nd for 25 years, I'm opposed to the annexation AN 21013 and the change of zone CZ 21057 for the proposed wilderness residential and commercial development. After reviewing several documents related to this proposed development, the Lincoln 2050 Comprehensive Plan and the Plan Forward, I really can't see any reason or benefit for trying to develop this 75 acres of agricultural land. This land now serves as a buffer from increasing traffic due to the ongoing developments in that area, specifically Southwest Village Heights over there, and now with the going to be some development from the Lincoln Racetrack as well too. And I'm understanding that there will be a preliminary plat coming forward for Southwest Village Heights second edition as well too. In addition, after reviewing the staff notes concerning the annexation and change of zoning, I'm very concerned about the request of waiver for the preliminary plat process. Allowing this development to move forward with the administrative amendment should not be allowed, and the developer needs to provide all documentation, including cut fill, SWIP documentation, street profiles, stormwater runoff, and detention calculations for drainage basins for 100 and 500-year flood events. Circumventing this process leads me to more questions as to why the urgency to get this annexation and change of zone completed in an expedited manner. I understand the need to provide more housing for the growth of our city, but not every parcel needs to be developed. I would also like to add that this 75-acre parcel abuts the Highway 77 corridor and soon to be the North Beltway of the Highway 77 Beltway corridor. And this parcel will basically be cut off, as you're all aware that Old Cheney will be a dead end when that Beltway is completed within the next few years. I'm also opposed to any commercial development attached to this project, with the very nicely established commercial area located at Coddington and West A. Grocery store, gas stations, dentist over in that area, hardware store, food places. And there's also just a few miles away from there, just a couple miles from there, we're at 14th and Old Cheney. There's plenty of commercial. We have Costco just 4 miles away from this proposed development. And like I stated earlier, with the oncoming of the casino over at the Lincoln Racetrack, there is development over there with infrastructure already in place that could easily take care of any needs for the people in that area. I feel that the 2050 comp plan should be amended to add this parcel of land to Wilderness Park and designate it as the premier green space for the Southwest Lincoln area. Give something back to the taxpayer of our cities. Let us consider the quality of life for the mind and the body over trying to build houses and apartment complexes on every square foot of land. Put profit and urban sprawl aside and consider this area sacred, safe from the urban development. Preserve and conserve should be our motto for this development. In conclusion, you can plainly see that the parcel should not be developed, and I implore you to consider not allowing this proposed annexation and change of zone to be accepted. I also ask that those on this commission to come and see for yourselves this beautiful area of Lincoln. Have any of you ever been out there to see where this development is going to take place? Thank you for doing that. A couple of things I'd like to address from some of the testimony I heard earlier. I was a little disappointed by the planners over here who said it was several hundred. It's 575 maximum units that will be over there. And with the dense housing and even single family homes, we all know that we're not just one car. We're 2, 3, 4 cars for almost every resident, and even more for the apartment houses. And I don't think that, I don't know, but I don't feel that any of the traffic studies that were presented today took into the account of the closing of Old Cheney and the development that's already taken place on the southwest part of Lincoln, specifically Old Cheney and South Folsom Street. And as far as this abutting up to Wilderness Park, the 6 foot high fence, I don't believe will do much, because today, with the cost of everything, infrastructure, the price of lots have gone way up. The lots are getting smaller so these guys can make money. Therefore, the houses are going up. And no 6 foot fence is going to take care of any 2 or 3 story house. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Dylan Lanowski. I live at 4700 South First Street. I don't know if you can see this stuff, but I just want to generally talk about the land where I'm at. I first want to state that I'm generally opposed to the annexation of this area, in particular 4700 South First Street, and I'm mostly here in opposition to the zoning action CZ 21057. I wanted to acknowledge that the land we're talking about today should be in the hands of the Pawnee and Oto Missouri tribes, first and foremost. Anyway. In my comments, you all got this map, so I do have additional.
Turned. You've got it sideways.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
In my comments that I sent in, I sent this map. If anybody needs a paper copy, I have a copy here. But I just wanted to kind of a lot of people are going to talk about all the different priorities that are in the plan forward list, and I mean there's a bunch that relate to just what we're talking about here, and so I just wanted to just kind of, for those people who have not been to that place, who have not spent a lot of time there, I have spent a lot of time here, and I hike there daily. Forgive me, I hike everywhere in this area. But first of all, I wanted to talk about the proposal along First Street here is absurd on a lot of levels. I wanted to share, I'm sorry. This is a plan, the PUD, with the actual lot lines included, and I think it's a lot more stark and ugly representation of what they're planning to create here. All due respect to them, I just feel like they need to understand the land, what's there, what they're potentially going to destroy, because it's a whole lot. You look at these lots, they back right up to a current prairie restoration here. I'm sorry. So you have the sandstone prairie that everybody's been talking about right here. And then you also have prairie restoration that's happening on this side that Parks and Rec is working on diligently to restore prairie there. I'll just go into talking about the land. So not only is this in prairie restoration, Parks and Rec is working along the creek side to restore oak savanna. If you go along this side, there's at least 50 100 to 200-year-old bur oak trees that are all along the creek side here. And they continue throughout the park, throughout Wilderness Park, all up and down, these majestic bur oak trees. And Parks Department is working throughout the park to try to preserve these areas because they're just magical. What's that?
1 minute remaining.
Okay. Anyway, so I also wanted to talk about this hillside. As other people talked about, it's just a magical vista. It's a beautiful place. If you've ever been out there in a starry night, whew, it needs to be preserved. You cannot shave this hill. You cannot shave this hill. Just to the southwest of that, the seasonal pond that others talk about. It's a feeding ground for a lot of wildlife, and it's a water source, obviously away from traffic. It's a place where waterfowl can rest and whatever. In particular, on the west side of the development, on county property, there's another sandstone outcropping that is actually native prairie, and it has unique plants on it.
Time.
I'm sorry. Anyway, I just wanted to close by saying that the development is highly irresponsible. I would hope that the city could actually take on this land, buy this land, and incorporate it into the park. Thank you.
I'll take a copy of that map too.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wyatt Nelson. I live at 1601 B Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68502. I'm an educator and a small business owner, and I've also am a volunteer who does a lot of work in the community. And one of the things that I do
is volunteer and helping out with some of the property preservation that goes on there at Mrs. Danker's property. And I want to say thank you for your comments, and allowing us to spend time there. I want to let you all know that first of all, a couple counter arguments, and I want to tell you a little story, and then I want to talk about mental health. And I hope I can do that in my 4 minutes. It was mentioned by one of the city planners over here that the reason Wilderness Park exists is for environmental and conservation reasons. That's not true. It's part of the floodplain program. It is designed to capture floodwaters. If the city and this department realized that we wanted to go forward with environmental and conservation reasons, then this hill and this pond that we're discussing today would be protected. Also, there's been a mention that this fence, this 6-foot fence, will protect this sandstone prairie from dogs and people walking there. I don't see how that's possible, considering it would only take about a little 100-foot walk north up to Pioneers to come around. In fact, the fence in that area might actually encourage more dog-human traffic on that very sensitive prairie, which is now very seldom walked on because it's so much easier to access the official entrances to the park. So I don't really see how that fence and that berm are going to help that problem, though I do appreciate this very small effort being made. There are other counter arguments, but I'd like to give my time to a more personal story. One day I was driving down South 1st Street, and I saw a young man walking on that hill. And I had had conversations with some people before who had been members of the church coming up, and I kind of asked them, is this your area? And they said, well, it's owned by the church, but we don't mind. I'm not sure who this person was. They might have just been congregants. They might have not had the authority to speak on this, but they say we don't mind people walking up here as long as they're not breaking any other laws. They're not, dumping or anything like that. And it's a very spiritual place. There at that top of the hill, as it was mentioned, you can see very far. And this young man, I asked him, I said, what's going on with you? He looked really upset, and he said, I'm having a really hard time, and he was talking about, contemplating about, taking his own life. And what he did, instead of doing that, was he came to this hill, and he sat on that rock at the top of that hill. And when he did that, he realized the beauty of his life and the beauty of the nature and the beauty of the land that we live on here. And he walked down that hill, and then I seen him, and I asked us when I spoke with him, and I gave him a ride back to his house. And he lived, and he was a young high school student. So I just want to let you all know that that hill is a lot more than just a place to build houses for a lot of people in this city. The other thing I want to mention is that there are a lot of studies and research that show that vistas, the ability to see for a long distance, is a fundamental part of human mental health. In this city, there's not that many opportunities. We can go to the top of the Capitol building when it's open, which is nice, and you can see a long ways, but it's not quite the same as being on top of a hill. And for those of us who live in urban areas, we don't have that much opportunities to see a long distance. I know that the LFR and the Lincoln Police get called to people sitting on roofs sometimes, even trying to have fires on roofs. And these are obviously not very safe and not a really good idea. So we need to have a safe place and a legal place for our young people and our old people and everybody else in the city to be able to see a long distance. This is something that goes very back to the basis of our evolution of human beings being able to feel safe when we can see a long distance. There are very few sites in Lancaster County where this is possible. And this one, so close to the center of the city, can be one. There is so much development going on in Lincoln right now. You all are aware of this. I'm sure you all are approving new areas every week for continued development. So the question is, how many times when you all are voting on something like this is this room filled with people who are having emotional and impassioned arguments against changing the zone? How many times do you see there being a resistance to it like this? And is it really worth staking, the mayor's reputation, who appoints all of you, and staking, the city, the public's relationship with this board on one development, on such a critical area? So I just want you all to remember, that story. And I just am very strongly saying, please consider delaying this vote for another week or two, or considering voting no. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Questions for Wyatt? Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Tokuya Nagompi Imachapi. My name is Bo Bordeaux. I live at 800 Glen Ridge Road, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68512. I'm a member of the Rosewood Sioux Tribe. And I want to shed a little light on some of the things that go on out here at the Wilderness Park. The residential area that we're talking about on the east side of the road is owned by this young lady. That has been a sacred site for many years. That was established, I believe, in 1976 by Chief Leonard Crow Dog, Rosewood Sioux Tribe. And my father was a medicine man here in town, and I run ceremonies there on the weekends, every Friday night. And every Saturday we have ceremonies there. That's a sacred site to a lot of people around here, not just Native people. People come all the way from Council Bluffs, Iowa, from Omaha, just to have the ceremonies there. That's a public sweat lodge that we run there. And if you need help, you can come there and we'll perform a ceremony for you. And people come all the way, like I said, from Omaha and Council Bluffs. There's a holy man comes from Council Bluffs. I just had invited another holy man out of Omaha, Mr. Terry Lemire. He came there and ran a ceremony for me. And the first thing he said was he admired, he looked around, he saw all the medicine that's around there, all the environment that's sacred to us. The trees, the plants, everything. We all believe we're a part of creation, all the equal part of that creation. He kept exclaiming how beautiful it was there and how much medicine he saw around there. There's a lot of plants that grow there that we have a special relationship with, that we pick and use in medicinal purposes. And when we do that, we do it in a ceremonial way. We go up there and we ask those plants, which one of those will volunteer for us to sacrifice their lives for us, and they will do that. And they will show you a sign. And that's why we pick them, because you can't just go up and pick any plants. Because some of those plants are teaching the other plants. And those are the ones that we don't want to take. If you destroy this whole area that we have medicinal plants on, there won't be any more of that up there. And the impact this is going to have on those animals. I live in that neighborhood, okay? I live southwest of there, and every morning deer come through my backyard. I have all kinds of wildlife. They go all the way up to the library and into the cemetery up there to graze. You'll see them there at 4 o'clock in the morning. You'll see them dead on the highway on Old Cheney. You'll see them dead on the highway on Warlick Boulevard, because that's where they're crossing. And now we're going to get a lot more development in the casinos and the other areas around there. They're not going to have anywhere to go. You're going to eliminate all that from the park. You want to go through the park, you want to see nature, you want to see wildlife. It's not going to be there for you to keep developing this stuff. This development stuff is about, some people are going to make a lot of money on this, okay? And we're not going to hinder the growth of Lincoln, Nebraska if we just exclude this certain part. There's a lot of things under development around here. We got to save something for the people and for the wildlife and for the rest of the generations. We believe that we didn't inherit this world from our ancestors, we borrow it from our grandchildren. And it's our responsibility to look at those next 4 generations that are coming down the line to save something there for them. And that's what this is about. That's a sacred site. And we'll try to oppose this just on that. Like I said, there's many ceremonies going on there every weekend. We need that place. And it's been that way for a long time. As far as the light pollution, that creek is lower than everything else. You put a 6-foot fence up there and you develop all the stuff. You pull into your driveway, you're going to shine every light over that 6-foot fence. That's not going to break down the lights. That's going to flood that place. And all these developments, all the cars and all the traffic that's going to go on in there. You know, it's you can imagine all the people that are going to be swarming around that area. And where they're going to go? They're going to go right in that park. And that can be good and that can be bad, okay? And for certain areas of that park, I think it will be bad. It can only handle so much stuff. Those plants are going to disappear, and then the animals are going to go with them. Remember that. I'm not here. I'm going to speak for them. And I'm going to speak for all the people that we want to have our continue to have our ceremonies there. And the place for people to go. You know, this is every weekend. You know, I can barely keep up with the requests that we have. I got a call today from people. Want to go out there this weekend and have a ceremony. And, you know, we want to maintain this stuff. You know, we don't want to see it disappear. There's not many places we can really go to do that. And if people are coming from Omaha just to here to be at that sacred site because it is such a holy site, I want you to consider that. You know, don't destroy that for the growth of Lincoln. Really?
1 minute.
Okay. Yeah, the wildlife is our big concern, the sacred site itself. And the pollution and the runoff and all that stuff will be addressed by people who know about that better than I do. I'm here to speak upon the sacredness of those sites and hopefully the ability that you guys will see that we need to maintain those. Okay, thank you. I hope
State your name again for me, please.
My name is Beaumont Bordeaux.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is your sacred site on the Danker property in Wilderness Park or on the property being developed?
Well, we consider the whole place to be a sacred site, but yeah, on the residential property right here, that area 5 that they showed earlier. That's where our sweat lodge is at, right?
That's where you're,
Yes.
okay. Thank you for
But we
clarifying.
use the whole park and herbs and medicinal plants that grow there. And those animals bring us medicine. All of them do. We use every one of them. Eagle feathers, it isn't just because the feather is holy, it's the eagle itself. And they bring those things there, and they're there for us. Okay, I
Thank you
appreciate
for
your time. Thank
clarifying,
you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Napier. I live at 4101 Southwest 2nd Street, not very far from where this development is going to be.
It'll come on in a minute.
It always takes a minute. There you go.
Okay, so this is out of the Plan Forward stuff on the internet, but I just kind of wanted to highlight, I kind of want to consolidate some of the stuff that a lot of people have said. You know, this is the area that, the yellow area is what the area that we're talking about. It's a very small piece of land that fits very nicely into Wilderness Park there. You can see with the dark black line is the Highway 77, which is going to be the west bypass, which is going to continue to have more and more and more traffic on it. You know, there's a corridor there, a natural corridor there for animals to be able to travel, you know, up and down along that side of what's going to be an interstate or a bypass. So, you know, I think that adding more development in that spot, it just, you know, it doesn't seem like it's a logical place to do it. I understand, you know, the plan for high density and, you know, that helps with, you know, more tax dollars to be able to support infrastructure, but it just seems like, you know, this other dotted area over here to the side, you know, that's all stuff that's being planned development. It's flat land for the majority over there. You know, you don't have this beautiful hilltop, you know, the highest spot in the area that you're going to level. You know, I can't help but feel like, you know, some of the reason that there's that they don't want to show the plan for the grading and all of that stuff, you know, ahead of time is because it's going to be extensive. If you've been out there, that's a huge hill, you know, and they're going to have to do a major amount of destruction to that area to make that level enough to put city streets and so forth on there. This was a thing that Dale was, I believe, somebody was trying to show about, you know, showing all of the housing, you know, backed up to the park there. You know, there was one person that was talking about something about 33 feet of extra property going into the park. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but I don't know where that 33 feet is because it looks to me like those lots go right. You know, the shaded area is the street that they want to get rid of. Those lots go right back to the edge of the park. And, you know, they've mentioned adding a 6-foot buffer there and a berm and fence and so on, but I still think that, you know, you're right up against that park, and like I said, I don't know where that 33 extra feet. To me, that sounded misleading. It sounded like they were going to have 33 extra feet plus, you know, that 6 feet there and so on. That's right up against that park, you know, right up against that sensitive area with the sandstone prairie. So, you know, I understand this is kind of a preliminary thing, but it shows, you know, that what the plan is there. And, you know, I go back and forth upon, you know, about the moving of the street. You know, it seems to me one of the biggest complaints I hear about Lincoln, I've lived in Lincoln for 40 years and I love Lincoln, but the biggest complaint I hear is how long it takes to get anywhere in Lincoln, you know? And here's another example of that. You know, you're going from point A to point B, you know, on Old Cheney, taking a minute to 2 minutes to, you know, having to drive through this windy development with high density, you know, houses, children, people on bicycles. You know, people are going to go through there, you know, like the person from City Church was saying, you know, the Old Cheney's closing where it crosses over or joins to Highway 77 if that plan happens, and so there's going to be a tremendous amount of people moving that are going to go through there regardless, you know. So I think having that street that goes straight through is important, but then, you know, then you're right up against the park, and if that, you know, development is there, then, you know, you're going to have a lot more traffic. So you know, like I said, in that first picture of that yellow area, it seems to me like it makes much more sense to have that set aside, at least, if not part of the park at this point, set aside as an option of being part of the park in the future with that beautiful sight line. Another thing I wanted to touch on real quick is the traffic studies. Traffic studies, I don't think, you know, that was 2018, I think you said that main traffic study was, you know, and it doesn't show things like, you know, that there's soccer fields out there across on the other side of Highway 77. The traffic, when that happens, is backed up a long ways, you know, both directions. If they're trying to turn there, the turning lane is not anywhere close to long enough. So when the light turns, you know, a couple cars get a turn and no other cars move. You know, it becomes a traffic jam in that spot, you know. So with Old Cheney closing, that First Street used to go through to a bridge that's closed now because of water damage. And that's another thing, you know, you've got 2 bridges and 2 railroad crossings that on Pioneers. So, you know, 2 bridges that are probably as old as that other bridge that was closed due to the flood. You know, the flooding last time damaged that bridge. I've seen that bridge underwater twice in the 20 years that I've lived in this neighborhood. Both of those bridges, you know, so if water washes out one of those bridges, then where are you at, you know? I mean, first of all, it's a huge expense to replace a bridge. Secondly, where are people gonna go? And that Highway 77 interchange, you know, the state hasn't decided, are they gonna build an overpass? Is it gonna go through? Is it not gonna go through? All of that stuff is up in the air. It seems to me like, why would we make a decision on adding a huge amount of people to that area when we don't know whether there's gonna be any access to Highway 77 or what the access is gonna be? And Old Cheney being closed and 2 bridges and 2 railroad tracks, it just doesn't make sense to put that many people in that tiny little spot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I guess I didn't ask if anybody had any questions.
Can you not?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, folks. My name is Roger Carmichael. My wife and I own a property down at the end of Southwest 2nd Street, down where you can see these very poor drawings. I have other talents. I can pack a good parachute. I was born and raised in Lincoln here at 11th and South. I grew up at 8th and South. My life has been around this park, the old Manasquia campground, Epworth Lake Park. I actually knew Arnott Folsom, who owned that ground and is part of the park system. In other words, I've spent hundreds of hours and ridden my horse many, many, many times and taken horse rides of other people through that park. Now, I know there's a lot of people here to talk about that park, so I'll step a little aside. We have people who know more about the fauna and all that, but something was touched on, the sobriety of what it feels like to be in there. And it's if this keeps going on, you might as well trash the name wilderness and just come up with city park, because that's what's happening here. You know, it just is. It's going to just going to corridor that whole thing together, and that's what it'd be, you know, become, you know. So anyway, I'm going to start. I got a couple points here. First of all, you know, you all know Old Cheney, 14th and Warlick, a mess. Agreed? Anybody who denies that is wrong. That was built without enough study. I'm going to move on past that. But what's going to happen here, and when and if they choose to close Old Cheney, which I am not in favor of, they should at least have put an overpass over the future Interstate 280, which is what the West Bypass and Saltillo is going to come. I've seen the map. All right, so people, if you shut down Old Cheney, this has already been brought up, you're going to take people are not going to come out of the Salt Valley housing area. They're not going to go north or any other way to go to get to Warlick out by the casinos. They're going to cut right through here. They're going to come down that gravel road, which I don't doubt it needs to be paved. And I too am a church member, 20 some years there. But they're going to come right through that residential area at probably unmarked speeds. I am a 22-year teacher of Stop class. Have I seen anybody here? I get a lot. I can verify everything I say. I get a lot of residential speeders. Retired Lincoln Fire Department. I and other emergency workers, we have worked pedestrian wrecks. I'll just stop with that. It's ugly. But that's what's going to happen here. That's going to be a mini War Lake problem right there. Everybody coming in. Now let's talk about the trucks. I have every license you can get in America. I'm a professional truck driver trainer. I know trucks. You got harvest season, grain trucks coming through here. That is a known CB shortcut of coming off the 77 to get over to the grain mill over on South 10th Street. You know, I don't know, 50 trucks a day, easy. You know, if you doubt me, go look at the lines. They're going to come through there. You know, today's truck drivers are being driven by 16-year-olds. I'm a nationally approved truck driver examiner trainer, and it's a long story. I can prove everything I say. But these drivers are now allowed to be running these rigs at 16. And, you know, I test driver ed students to get their license. I'm testing one tonight. Okay. So I know young drivers, but let's get back to the whole trucking thing. There's going to be a lot of truck drivers coming through that roundabout. I am a fan of roundabouts. Okay? But I got it. Now I'm losing my time here. I got to go to this. We live down here at the end of this road. In here, there's 30 or so of us, acreages, the old Cadman property that goes back historically. I don't see what's going on here. Excuse me, why there isn't a offshoot here to us. I don't know why. If you guys didn't get that done or whatever. But needless to say, people are going to get off of that roundabout and come down that road like they do, like a bat out of heck, trying to get turned around at very high speed. I have several neighbors here. How many people have come smoking by your driveway? There you go, at very high speeds. What I see is if this goes through, and I'm not for it, okay, I'll say that, but if this goes through, that roundabout, I got five more seconds, needs extra signage to declare that at this time is a dead end. If this goes through, please put that in your notes. That's what I've said my piece. But I can definitely see tractor trailers ending up down there on that road. And you're not going to be backing out of that into a roundabout. Okay. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Roseberry Brown. I live at 1423 F Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm here to talk about flooding. As we know, Salt Creek in the past was very prone to flooding. And back in the 50s, lives were lost. And if you, Gooch's Mill on 6th and South, until a few years ago, had a mark on its grain elevator about halfway up, and that was left from the flooding that came down 6th and South and flooded that whole area. And then after that, Wilderness Park was established for flood control, and that really helped a lot. That big flood didn't happen anymore, and I think it should be extended farther south, actually, but that was what happened. But since then, there has been a lot of development around the park, and the Salt Creek levees are overflowing, and Salt Creek is overlapping its banks when there's a rain. And we know that we're still in danger of flooding. And on August 15th, 2020, Olson's completed a study called the Salt Creek Floodplain Resiliency Study. And in that study, very thorough study, studied the Salt Creek floodplain. And one of the strong recommendations in that was that because of more development around all through the Salt Creek floodplain area, that more study needs to be done, and those studies should be done soon. And that development needs to, those studies should be applied to all future development, especially near floodplain areas. And I understand this development is not in the floodplain. However, there's such a high groundwater level in that whole area that the groundwater drains into Salt Creek there. There's such a high groundwater level that even detention ponds would not retain it. And if you go across 14th Street, across from Southwest High School, there's a detention pond. Detention ponds are built through the old Kruger development. They're meant to hold that groundwater, the runoff from the development, meant to hold that back. But they don't hold it back. The Southwest High, as we know, all their playing fields fill up. Even a small rain, some of their playing's filled up with water. So we know that groundwater level would flow off this proposed development on down through Salt Creek, and 75 acres of development of a developed area is going to create a lot more runoff. And I really question whether the proposed retention pond is going to hold it, because it doesn't hold it on the other side of Salt Creek. So I would recommend that we be prudent and that we postpone this whole proposal and that we also commission a thorough study of how the defective development would affect future development. We're living on borrowed time. We haven't had a lot of rainfall lately, and we know that the danger is there, and we know that it's going to happen at some time unless something is done. So I would recommend we postpone this until those studies are done. We can find out what effect this proposed area would have on future flooding north of there. We know it's going to affect the floodplain north of there, and we need to find that out. So please, let's be prudent. Thank you.
My name is Brandon Mills. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well as my parents, whom live 2 places down from me on Southwest 2nd Street. They were not able to make it. I've been a resident of Southwest 2nd Street for 32 years and 3rd-generation resident. For the last 50-plus years, this neighborhood of acreages has been a quaint, peaceful collection of homes and community, tucked away from the noise and bustling life of the city. This is the exact reason why all of us living in the area chose to live here. Everything that makes this neighborhood and surrounding area special, giving it its charm, is about to be tarnished and blighted by the city of Lincoln's so-called progress. The only things that are going to result from your progress are an exorbitant amount of increased traffic, a degradation of wildlife and habitat, and for us existing residents, all we're going to get is increased taxes on what's soon to be decreased property value due to the proposed townhomes and apartments built adjacent to us. The increased traffic on a 2-lane road like Pioneers Boulevard will be astronomical. Pioneers in this little stretch has 2 bridges and 3 sets of railroad crossings, all of which the City of Lincoln and BNSF can barely keep above a state of mild dilapidation as it is. The majority of the eastern part of this area, as we all know, is in a floodplain, and within recent years, both bridges have been underwater and impassable for days. With no plans of expanding Pioneers to 4 lanes or addressing the bridge issue, the city plans on shutting down Old Cheney, which we all know is the main thoroughfare south of Pioneers that connects to Highway 77,
and inevitably meaning all the traffic trying to get northbound on Highway 77 will be consolidated and diverted down Pioneers Boulevard. You combine that with the 500 plus new inhabitants of this proposed neighborhood, the typical heavy traffic of people going to and from the YMCA ball fields, and the extremely heavy traffic in the fall from the grain trucks trying to get to the grain elevators. And now you're going to throw in all of the construction equipment and everything like that that's going to be going in and out of the new proposed building area. Not to forget, this proposed cloverleaf or whatever it's going to be is going to be dumping directly into a roundabout. The city planners have already told us that they have no plans to assess the widening of Pioneers Boulevard until after the proposed housing development has been completed. I don't understand how anyone can justify putting something like this in without assessing the roadways that are currently there. Me personally, and I'm assuming most of my neighbors and everyone behind me, would really like to see the details of this so-called traffic study that was done a year ago. I highly doubt it was done through the busiest or peak seasons that experience the highest levels of traffic. As for the wildlife and habitat issue, Wilderness Park for years has been part of the Salt Creek Resilience Study and has been specifically in place to act as a designated buffer zone that not only acts as a floodplain to protect the downtown area from flooding, but it also provides habitat for countless deer, turkeys, and other small critters. Wilderness Park is a safe haven for wildlife, acting as protection from the sprawling, ever-encroaching cityscape of Lincoln. The surrounding agriculture area, which we have all been discussing here today, acts as a travel corridor that a few of these species use for when they are following instinctive migration patterns, change of season travel patterns, etc., as well as fleeing turbulent floodwaters. This proposed urban expansion development is not only intrusive in its truest form, but it will inevitably displace more wildlife onto the roadways than there already is. Increased traffic density, in addition to increased population of wildlife on the roadway, is only going to equate in the poorest of consequences. You have increased loss of animal life, automobile damage, personal injury, potential death. In conclusion, I implore you to look past the monetary value and revenue streams that this new development could possibly bring and use logic and reason to realize how bad this annexation and zoning change is going to bring. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Clint Densberger. I live at 2735 Garfield Street in Lincoln, 68502. In full disclosure, I am also a board member of Friends of Wilderness Park. But I chose to speak to you today. Adam covered our board's position pretty eloquently, and I chose to speak to you as a citizen. I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for Manzito's time that they've offered to us to open a dialogue about this. And I must say, as it's been said already, that I am grateful for the original caretakers here, the Odo and the Pawnee. As a citizen, it sounds like I might even have lived here longer than any of the other speakers. I didn't feel that old when I got here. However, as it turns out, I'm a fifth generation member, citizen. My great-great-grandfather settled here 12 dozen years ago, 1878. There was still lots of open land available. Somebody mentioned the Cadman residence, and if you're not very familiar with early history, the Fort Kearny cutoff came through that part of Salt Creek, and tens of thousands of pioneers traveled across that part of Wilderness Park, still south of the city at the time. That historical significance, that and the native caretakers before us, speaks to me deeply. If I can paraphrase badly, a spiritual wisdom from Native American culture. Often what they try to do this generation is what they're doing for the 7th generation after them. My granddaughter, unborn still, would be the 7th generation that I've been here. And I'd like to think that my ancestor before me planted seeds and had imagination for what could be in this community. And in the ensuing years, I think many of those joys and triumphs succeeded. But I think we have to acknowledge also that over 95% of the saline wetlands that were once here are gone. That 99% of the prairie that stood in this area is gone. And that now we spend our taxpayer money for large studies to look at, to create the Comp Plan 2050 and the Salt Creek Resiliency Studies to tell us what most of us already know when we look around not only Nebraska, but the United States and the world, and we see wildfires, and we see droughts, and we see floods, we see hurricanes increasing. These realizations are confirmed in the data and the science, and we have these great studies in front of us to tell us how we need to protect these rain basins, from which the NRD already admits that our current levee system is 2 feet shy of a 100-year flood. We're developing and putting all of this money into the new Haymarket and downtown development. Fantastic projects for the community. And who's speaking to protect that? All the people downstream from this basin will either enjoy the benefits or the short-sightedness of what our current motivations are. In 50 years from now, we cannot change what has been put in there. But if we consider the reality of carbon sequestration, of precipitation retention that agricultural land already produces, if we look at the success of community crops and the way that that outreaches to underserved communities, of the Karen people, the Afghanistan people, the Yazidi that have moved here, if we think about and imagine how we could plant seeds now that the youth of today and these underserved communities could create something even larger than community crops right here on this land that's already agricultural. We could have a working farm for kindergarten through graduate school students to come together collectively that are already well aware of the future they're inheriting from us and start to create the environment and the culture that they want and create local sustainable foods that are available right here within the city. I'd like to imagine that there are a lot of great possibilities if this land is kept as agricultural. And the fact that that they want to waive at this point this grading plan, I think speaks to the reality that they'd rather come to terms with just doing the minimum required and not thinking about the future and the long-term consequences. I think we all need to reflect on that. Thank you for your time.
Nope, I just wanted to make sure we checked.
My name's Deb Brambilla. We live at 4111 Southwest 2nd Street. My husband and I have lived there. That's been our home, not our house, for 25 years. As you can tell, we all have a lot of concerns about this. It's you know, beyond just the facts. Of course, it's a personal thing too. Okay, traffic. You know, they've talked about pioneers. One of the things that hasn't been talked about is if and when they're going to put an overpass or interchange up on 77. And that is a big issue because we don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. There's probably going to be some kind of detour around that, like they had at 77 and where Coddington, the Rosa Parkways. I don't know if any of you live in that area, but the deal going on there. That was a mess. There's no traffic arrows at all up on Highway 77. You can sit there a long time waiting to make that left-hand turn. Certain times of the day, maybe 1 or 2 cars can get through on the change of the light. And like they've said, if you pull out on a green at Pioneers and you don't look really good, you're going to get hit by somebody going fast. There's many, many times I would have been dead if I'd have pulled out there. And we're looking at hundreds of more people living in that immediate area using that same roadway. So we don't know when and if this is going to happen or how it's going to affect things. And currently we have 3 ways out of the neighborhood, which you have to go west up to 77, east all the way down to Highway 2, or south on South First Street. And we know at some point they're going to close Old Cheney getting onto 77. Now, I don't know how much you drive over there, but Old Cheney is a mess. You know, the intersection up there, all the traffic that goes down from 14th all the way to 77. I feel sorry for the people that live on that road. I really do, because the amount of traffic is just, and we know that that's going to be diverted over to Pioneers at some point in time. And, you know, everybody owns more than one car, or there's more than one person. So if you're talking, you know, close to 600 residents and commercial, that is adding a lot of traffic to our road. And being where it's at with the bridges and the creeks and the railroad and everything else, they're not going to widen that to 4 lanes. There's no money, you know, and to have to do all that. Sitting waiting for trains. There's been times I've actually turned around, went all the way down Van Dorn and come back home from the other side, and the train's still sitting there on the track. And that is not uncommon at all. There's a lot of trains that go down that track. And the traffic circle, you know, that takes a lot of land and time to build. It's like the one over at Coddington A. It seemed like it took forever for them to get that in. Well, where are you going to divert all the traffic in that time? You know, it's bad enough for the people that already live there. But then if you put another 1,000 vehicles into that mix on a daily basis, it's going to make it impossible for all of us that live there. And we kind of feel that with all the developments around the city, if you've driven around the city and seen how many new places are going up, we don't feel that this development is necessary. You look at the amount of land where it's at, right up against the park, and when they talk about eliminating First Street, well, then all those people would have to drive through a neighborhood. And I'm counting 31 lots that are going to be back right up to Wilderness Park. And, you know, the 6-foot fence, maybe you'll get rid of some of the light, but you're never going to get rid of the noise. Yeah, this 5 minutes is going really fast. A lot of our neighbors couldn't be here because they're at work. Because I can tell you right now, there's more than this that are against this. You know, we live directly north of Pioneers. From when we get out in our street, we look up the hill, we can see the trees, we can see the hill, we can see the cornfields. You know, and I know from experience that in the fall when they harvest, that field is full of deer and wild turkey that live in our neighborhood. We've got so many things that come even through our backyard because we all have acreages there. It's quiet, it's peaceful. We're on a dead-end gravel street, and we love that, you know, because we don't have the constant traffic going by, you know. And so, you know, I'm hoping that you've had a chance to actually check out this neighborhood. There's so many places that would make more sense to allow a development than down in this area. And if this gets changed, it's a permanent change. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say, I pray, and I honestly do pray about this, that with all the factors considered to protect Wilderness Park, the wildlife, our quality of life and homes, we ask the rezoning and the annexation to be denied because it is not a good idea at all. Thank you.
Go ahead.
the tail end of it. I'll
Just say, is there additional testimony in opposition?
go right ahead.
My name is Richard Emig. I live at 3428 P Street. I've lived in the area for a long time. I think all that is kind of irrelevant. Wilderness Park does something for us that no amount of development can ever hope to accomplish. There are many, many people that get much satisfaction out of using the park as it is. I feel like if we encroach on it, we're destroying something for ourselves, for our children, and for Lincoln. Thank you.
My name's Charles Kuhnel. I own Wilderness Stable at 200 West Calvert Street inside Wilderness Park. I wasn't aware that this meeting was gonna happen until Tuesday. I wasn't invited to the Manzito neighborhood meeting, so I missed that on the 22nd. My biggest concern about developing this property is the buffer zone for the park and the wildlife that is there. Those fields that are being farmed right now is a grazing ground and a feeding ground for the deer and the turkey. And we're talking herds of 30 deer plus. Where are they gonna go? They're either gonna enter into the city or they're gonna run across the highways, cause disasters there. By opening up the zoning on this property, Speedway Motors owns 20 acres next to Capitol Tower, just to the north of where this 75 acres is. If you permit this to happen, you're going to have to allow Speedway Motors to develop their 20 acres that is sitting right across the park, and there will be no buffer zone left in this area for that park. I mean, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. They talked about how they want to take First Street and make it curvy, slow the traffic down. You eliminate the buffer that there is to Wilderness Park if you do that. Leave First Street straight. I'm sorry they're going to lose their 31 lots. That's why they want to make First Street crooked. But it doesn't protect the park in any way at all by making that curvy. And I've lived on this road for 20 years. Kids love to drive on curvy roads. Everybody in this room that lives in that neighborhood knows that that South First Street Dead Man's Curve is just attracts them. Every night, that's all you hear is those cars racing up and down that curvy street. And there's been multiple times where I've had kids knock on my door, want me to pull them out of the ditch. I assisted them by calling the sheriff. So I don't have a lot more to say. Personally, owning the Wilderness Stables, I put up my own hay. And this development will make it impossible for me to get my equipment in and out of this neighborhood. I don't think any of you know what it's like to pull a 16-foot swather down a road. Now try to pull it through a roundabout where the signs aren't wide enough to get that swather through. I'm an individual, and there's millions of dollars at stake. But there's also precious land sitting right next to it. And not to mention, right across 77 to the west, Hoppy and Sons have already got permission to develop residential houses right there across from the soccer fields, which is another 500 plus doors that are going to be going in, both to the north and to the south of Hope Community Church that sits there. To add another 500 next to north of City Church on the parcel we're talking about, in the next 5 years, you're talking 1,200 additional houses. Put 2-3 vehicles per house. They shut down Old Cheney. They put an overpass on Pioneers Boulevard. Our infrastructure is horrible. Let's not add to the problem. Make sure the infrastructure's in place before we allow this to go forward. We've been burned too many times in the city of Lincoln by not doing it the right way. For once, step back and do it the right way. Thank you very much.
Too many things. Good afternoon. I live at 921 South 35th Street, Lincoln 68510. Thank you all for providing this forum to give all of us an opportunity to speak to you today. Development is not necessarily progress. I am just a regular old citizen who enjoys going out to Wilderness Park for all the reasons that that park provides that none of the other city parks do, and that is wilderness. The opportunity to smell and see and walk on that land is different than any other place in Lincoln, and it should be preserved. Not only preserved, but I advocate for a buffer around the entire park, because little by little it is being taken away from us by development. So I ask the following questions. Who will build, and how long will it take for a railroad overpass to handle the addition of 1,000 daily cars? Because it's 500 units, but you know as well as I do that most of those units are going to have at least a minimum of 2 residences, and that means 2 cars for working families. That's 1,000 cars on that street every day, going to and from work. How many animals will lose their lives when they're deemed a nuisance because their habitat has been encroached upon? They see lights, they smell garbage. They come over to see the smells, and they get hit. We already have enough dead raccoons and squirrels and dogs on our streets as it is. What about non-point pollution and our light pollution and noise pollution and the impact on city services? Wilderness Park is a unique parcel of land. Put a buffer around the park, protect it for all the citizens of Lincoln, and please do not rubber stamp another development that is not necessarily progress. Thank you.
My name is Adam Hintz, 1919 Prospect Street, president of Friends of Wilderness Park. But in these comments, I will be writing in opposition to the zone change on my own personal behalf. So Wilderness Park is a sacred place for me, as sacred as any church. My parents brought me to Wilderness Park when I was 2 years old in 1982, and I have volunteered for Friends of Wilderness Park for close to 13 years. My children and I have enjoyed its trails and vastness for almost 20 years. Wilderness Park celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, and since its beginning, the park has always been reserved to be kept in its natural state. As long as I have been a volunteer, the threat of urban sprawl has always been present, and I am thankful for the smart growth policies the comprehensive plan has set forth to keep sprawl in check. With this proposed change to zone and wilderness crossing development, I urge you to consider the special place Wilderness Park has in this community. Goal G6, G7, and G8 in the comprehensive plan point to a way Lincoln can grow while respecting our ecological legacy in Wilderness Park. I implore you to reject the amendment as it is currently written and ask the planning staff to see how the change of zone relates to the goals mentioned above. Being so close to a floodplain and Salt Creek, Waiver 1 in the amendment would be a detriment to any community that may live in Wilderness Crossing. We must have a grading, drainage, and stormwater detention plan in place before any residential development can be considered. And the Salt Creek Resiliency Study is a great place to look into for buffers and riparian corridor protection. Lincoln's largest park needs to be respected if we're going to have a park we are proud of. I strongly recommend you oppose the amendment for this zone change and any amendment relating to it until goals G6, G7, and G8 are addressed and a plan for grading, drainage, and stormwater detention can be provided. Finally, I hope you hear all of these calls to protect Wilderness Park as a direct reference to issues and policies planned forward and the comprehensive plan have addressed. The tools are at our fingertips. We just need to use them. Thank you.
My wife couldn't be here. Can I have 5 minutes to speak for her?
Now, the attorney is saying no. I'm sorry, but we do have your testimony. Would you just like us to put ×2 on yours? No, I mean, we'll so noted that you're also speaking for.
Things circled in your, environmental plan, your goals. She had highlighted a bunch of stuff in here where, this plan doesn't meet your goal. There's probably about 20 things in here where she circled in your goals, for plan forward of things that don't meet this, so.
Thank you. All right, I think that completes. Yes, Steve.
Are you opposing it? No.
This is this staff
Steve
questions.
Henderson of the Planning Department. I think this would be a good spot to take a break.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll break for 5 minutes. We'll be back at 3:50. I'm just waiting for the TV to come back on. All right. Thank you. We are back from a break, and we are ready to proceed with staff questions.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
You want to go over it? Okay. I have a few questions for you. And maybe some of these are for road, watershed, or NRD. From the floodplain study, can you give us more of a synopsis on what watershed or NRD has said about the proposal or the permit right now?
I can't speak for watershed, but generally, and this would be common in the PUDs, is that the waiver they're requesting is not to go below city standards at all when they come through with their grading and drainage plan. So this is just allowing the general concept, zoning and annexation to be looked at and approved, and then would still need to meet city standards for their drainage and grading when that gets submitted at a later time. But there's no floodplain on the property. So generally that would cause a concern. If we saw floodplain, then watershed may require them to submit the plan at this time. But they did review the initial submittal of this application. We're okay with that waiver.
With watershed? You reviewed it with watershed?
Watershed did review this.
They did.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'll come back to what my thoughts are. Go ahead.
Who else has questions?
Oh, no, I was
okay.
just pointing at Dick.
I'm good with, as far as I'm hearing from all of the testimony, planning has covered all of the areas that have been brought up by property owners. And I think it's a pretty good explanation. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, this is not an addition, but I'll just reiterate that on our future land use map, this area is shown as urban residential. There's been a lot of discussion in the letters and in the comments about our environmental resource goals, elements, policies we have in the plan. And that is a very important element of the plan, and that's, we talk a lot about Wilderness Park, but also other natural resources in the county and in the city area. Something we don't talk about is an additional buffer around Wilderness Park to protect it. So yeah, just to kind of reiterate what I had said in terms of the comp plan. I think this fully conforms with the comp plan in terms of it's an urban residential neighborhood. It's a complete neighborhood. It has a mix of housing types. There'll be a neighborhood commercial center there. There's park access nearby. So from a comp plan perspective, I think we're in really good shape with this proposal.
I remember what I was going to say,
Okay.
if you don't mind. So
Yeah.
how many times have we waived that study prior to approval of the drainage plan? How many times have we waived that prior to approval for the zoning and changes?
Guess I would have a set number. Steve might have a little more
Oh,
detail
perfect,
on
great.
the number, but
He came right up because he knew that was coming.
So an exact number, I couldn't exactly give you, but clearly, but in some of we've even had use permits. And the general idea is that with a planned unit development, before they spend a lot of money on an engineering study only to find out their entire plan is turned down, they instead say, well, with a PUD, you can particularly use this tool to get the land uses, get the setbacks established. In this case, you're getting a general road network. You're seeing what the uses are. Is there any height waivers, those type of things. It's the same thing that we just had with Foxtail Meadows to the west. However, had this been in the floodplain, because we've had some projects that are actually in the floodplain, then staff has not supported the waiver because you really want to address what is the impact on the floodplain. Because otherwise, in this circumstance, they're going to have to meet all the floodplain standards. They're not going to be able to increase the runoff beyond what it is today. So that is why when staff looked at it, because it is a case-by-case basis, we felt comfortable with doing it this way. Sometimes you see that they do have all the details, because they have an end user and that user's ready to go and they don't want to wait for that. Or they might have some kind of a actual waiver to detention or something like that in mind. And in order to have a waiver to detention, well, you'd have to provide the details proving that that was acceptable. In this case, they're not asking to waive detention or any of those standards. So, as well as they wanted to make sure that this was going to be approved before they spent all the money on engineering.
And then does the public have one more chance to talk to that after we see the drainage, or that plan, the PUD plan? Or is this our final approval?
Well, so if the grading and drainage plan is postponed to after the city council approval, then that is done administratively. Certainly the submittal would be public, but there isn't a public hearing. It is just simply if they meet all of the city standards, which is partly the role here, then it would be approved because they met all of the city standards. Now, that would include any standards that might be added through the PUD. So, for instance, if the PUD said that, well, they're going to move the access point this way or that way or something, well, they, of course, would have to meet that as well.
So then tagging on to that, like with the issue of, the concern that's been raised about the light, and then there was discussion on the part of the applicant about working with, and I have to go back to my notes, the Dark Skies Association and but what's in the covenant is an issue with the developer and not necessarily anything that is.
The covenants are typically private.
Private, right?
As part of the PUD, you could add in a condition that they have a 10-foot outlot with a fence and landscaping. That has been offered by the developer. So those kind of site plan kind of conditions we could certainly add. Lighting conditions, we already have a light standard where trespass has to go down to 0, but approval of individual fixtures, that is really not something city staff is set up to be, is to have every single person in the subdivision submit their fixtures to us on the outside. We just don't have the staff time for that. So that's something probably better addressed by the covenants. If I could add one thing, because a question came up in regards to the goals G, 6, 7, and 8. And G, I want to say, Adam, we quoted some of the other goals, but we didn't quote those. What do you know? But we did quote kind of the overall comprehensive plan, which did talk about environmental sensitivity. I will say in terms of G6, which is about active and healthy and connected lifestyle, this actually site has a lot to recommend to that. We're looking to have a trail on the north side of Pioneers Boulevard. It will have 2 different ways where people could easily access Wilderness Park or to get onto the city's trail network. So that's exactly the type of thing that we think helps encourage people to be far more healthy and to be far more active. To the west of this site will be ultimately an elementary school with a pedestrian overpass to the west. So we think there's a lot of ability here for people being next to Wilderness Park to have a active, healthy, and connected lifestyle, as well as the plan within it. We will have to disagree on keeping the street straight versus bent. A bent street, a street with a lot of curves within the neighborhood. And again, First Street is not an arterial street. First Street is a local street that encourages pedestrian activity. That encourages people to be out on their bikes and walk within the neighborhoods. So that, again, to us is part of a active, healthy lifestyle that you try to have people near parks and slow traffic. The environmental stewardship, part of that is to do things to try to decrease trips, to decrease emissions. And having people near Wilderness Park, near Highway 77, which hopefully they'll be able to get on to get quickly to downtown, to all the events and things downtown, or having all of these various recreational facilities nearby, that also helps reduce trips. If we start eliminating sites where people can build, that means they have to build further out, and that actually might increase the length of auto trips. It may not decrease the numbers. So we actually think in terms of the environmental stewardship, there are no endangered species on this particular site. Parks and Recreation felt comfortable with the location of the site in relation to the sandstone prairie that they have within their site. So we feel like it does meet G7, and also then G8, which talks about resiliency, certainly would encourage you to not build into the floodplain, not to have a sprawling community, as was mentioned. And so we think this is a good thing about having resiliency, because it is not in the floodplain. It is accessible. It is close to downtown. It is close to existing services versus having something that's more spread out. So we didn't quote those three goals in the comp plan, but we do think all three of those have been adequately addressed by this plan.
So, you had questions?
No, my question was similar to Christy in regards to waiver 1 and some of the other study specifically around the PUD. So from administrative amendment, it will not be a public hearing. It would be done with the developer and the planning department.
Correct. The same way as on Foxtail Meadows and some of the other ones, and whatever conditions would be implemented. I would note, one person asked about, well, the traffic studies and things would come later. The traffic study has already been submitted. We'll make sure if it's not available online that anybody who wanted to see the traffic study could. But that we would and did want in advance to address what kind of turn lanes and things were going to need to be done. And the recommendations of that traffic study is included as part of this plan. That was the left and right turn lanes at First Street, either a roundabout or left and right turn lanes at Southwest 2nd Street. and the requirement the developer do that will be part of an annexation agreement that will run along to City Council with this as well. So LTU felt comfortable with the traffic study recommendations, and they have recommend approval of what we have here, but we also then do also have Bob Simmering here if you'd like to get into more questions in regards to traffic or other LTU matters.
I did have one question about traffic.
Yep. Rich, why don't you go ahead and start, and then we can have other people follow up with questions.
Was the traffic study done with the closing of Old Cheney in mind and the future traffic patterns?
I might have to have the engineer comment on the details of that, but the traffic study will does reach out to those areas. Now, since we don't know for certain what they're doing at Old Cheney, and we don't even know for certain what they're doing at Pioneers, those details won't be fully reflected in that.
If I can add, not to the traffic study, but to the traffic modeling that was done as part of the comprehensive plan, that did include the closing of Old Cheney. And I verified that before time to make sure that our numbers that I was quoting to you earlier did reflect that Old Cheney would not connect to Highway 77. That's an assumption that had to be made of the plan that was based on the previous NDOT studies for this area. They're currently in the middle of a study that's supposed to be done by the end of this year to kind of verify what they want to do here. So that may or may not change the fact that there would be an interchange at Highway 77 and Pioneers, but it looks quite likely that at Old Cheney there will be no access to Highway 77, nor would there be an overpass. And so the traffic model that was done did show some increase in traffic on Pioneers. That would be reflected in the numbers I quoted to you earlier, and also then probably an increase in traffic on Warlick Boulevard, because the intersection of Warlick coming down to West Denton, that will become a interchange. Today it's an intersection with signals. In the future, that will be switched to an interchange by NDOT, where it'll just be like a state highway or interstate interchange. There'll be no signals stopping you as you're on Highway 77.
Just, I guess, a really quick question. So in that intersection of Pioneers and 77 then, was it assumed that it was residential, commercial, ag in that modeling?
So in the modeling, it is all based on what does the comprehensive plan show. So it is based on this being urban residential. Right. It is actually also based on there being more urban residential uses on the north side of Pioneers as well as development west of Highway 77 that we have seen recently. And typically by 2050 and maybe even by 2035, we would have assumed a full build out of all of those uses. And there would have been some commercial uses involved with that as well. And that modeling would have included that there is a school out in this area, and it would include that there is the soccer park, right field, and also the Optimist ball field as well. Now again, that those times, their peak sometimes are weekends and evenings, which is different in terms of the impact.
Then just following up on another question that's a road, did you have another thing? Sorry. Just at this point then, there's 2 access points to this potential development from the north. One is with the roundabout.
Correct.
And then the change to First Street, but it would only, the paving would end at the end of the PUD and the rest of First Street will remain gravel?
That is correct. We do not force developers to extend into neighboring properties. We do have them work outside of their development on the intersections that they create. So at Pioneers, they would be obligated to do work there.
Okay.
That answered my one question, and just as a clarification, that roundabout would go on to Southwest Second as well. There was a question on the, maybe an original plot that it didn't show that that roundabout entered Southwest Second.
Right. I think the concept we had here was that First Street would be the initial access point. That when the commercial came, they would have to have the Second Street, whether it's a roundabout or a full turn lane intersection, one or the other.
But you wouldn't close off access to Southwest Second, was my clarification.
No. And obviously, one of the questions came up earlier was when you do the roundabout, how does traffic get in and out? First Street would still be an accessible point.
Other questions for staff?
I have one more, just a clarification, and it's possibly just because I don't know, it's not about traffic. But when we annex land that has private well water, are they required to pay to get onto city water?
They're not. If they're within 300 foot of the sanitary sewer, the building, they're required to connect to the sewer, but they're not required to connect to the water. They will have to test their well and verify that the water is safe.
Would have to connect to the sewer.
They would, if they're within 300 feet of the sewer, they would have to connect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The waste can stay on their septic.
Thank you. All right, applicant rebuttal.
Well, we appreciate the testimony that we've heard today and some of the same concerns that we've heard in our meetings, with our neighbors. But I think it kind of goes back to the main points that, this is a piece of privately owned land. It's shown in the comp plan since 2002 for urban residential use. There have been multiple updates to the comp plan since that time, and it's continued to be shown for urban residential use. Neither the comp plan nor the Wilderness Park master plan shows it being acquired or kept for green space or a buffer zone. So I think, the final analysis is, what we're proposing today is in conformance with the comprehensive plan as it exists today and as it has existed for a lot of years. With respect to the waiver, I think planning's addressed that. It is not an atypical waiver, especially when you have a significant project, to try to get your zoning and your annexation in place and then come back with some of the details on those plans that are costly. As the planning representatives mentioned, we're not asking for any waivers to those standards. We still have to meet all of the city standards for the stormwater, detention, water quality. And so because we've lost our opportunity to waive, we have to make peace with the city on making sure we've gotten all of those details, taken care of, even though it would be approved through administrative amendment. I think a couple just final things are just a reminder, this development is not encroaching into the park in any manner. In fact, we've tried to do a couple things to pull some of that impact to the park with moving First Street. There may be disagreement as to whether, that's the best idea or not, but that was what Parks and Planning were supporting. And so it makes good sense for us to bring that road into the neighborhood. And then just finally, I think, with respect to the covenant requirements, those are private requirements. I think what we were doing is, in a lot of our meetings, that light trespass, that was a huge thing with the Friends of Wilderness Park and the neighbors. And so what the developer was trying to do is show that we are committed to showing some sensitivity to our proximity to the park. And so beyond what the city's requiring us to do, they're willing to go the next step and actually put some things in their own private covenants that they will enforce to respect and show some sensitivity to the park. So that's why that was being offered. Not that we expected you to put it in as a condition, but that's something that the developers are offering on their own part to try to address some of the concerns that we've heard. So I think I'm happy, and Mike and Sam are both available if you have any other questions that we can address for you.
Go ahead.
Again, it's kind of a verification because they showed a plot layout at some point that you'll have the 33-foot existing road that's there now that's being vacated. Then 10-foot buffer, is that still correct? Then that's where that 6-foot fence is?
Right.
So
And then the back of the property, yes, back of the lot lines.
From the park edge, you're gonna have 43 feet before the backyard of the house starts. And
Yes.
you're not asking for any waivers
No.
on setbacks there?
No. No, so that's correct. It just wasn't highlighted on that map. The part that was going to be dedicated back to the developer was highlighted, so it was hard to see that
I just wanted to
33-foot
verify I
strip
had
that
my
is
numbers
there.
right.
Yes, thank you.
Additional questions for the applicant?
Great, thank you.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Rodenberg.
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Public hearing is closed.
All right, the public hearing
Madam-
is closed. Entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, if I make a motion, and then can we talk about all three at the same time?
Yes.
I would move that we approve Comprehensive Plan Amendment 22001, which amends the future land use map.
Second?
Second, Ball.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded to approve agenda item 4.1A, which is the Comprehensive Plan Amendment 22001, but at this time, we will discuss all three items. But the motion is just for the first
Right.
piece. Yep.
There's no question that this land has been zoned for a long time in the comp plan to be urban residential. And I think they've made great strides, whether it's in working with the planning department or on their own volition, to move First Street further away from the park, which will help tremendously in any noise and some other pollution issues, which actually gives a better buffer for the park than exists today. So I think they're doing some good things to actually enhance the park. I can tell you that those residents are still going to have wildlife in their backyards, even as all around us has developed. We have a fox every night that sits on our patio, and I think is looking for a meal. But the wildlife has adapted very much in our area, and I think it will adapt here too. Actually, having the residential development there gives me greater hope that there will be less deer traffic across Highway 77 and less potential accidents that can happen by cutting off that cornfield, which is a natural element that brings them. As far as the change of zone for the planned unit development and bringing in the things afterwards that have to be approved by the planning department with an administrative amendment, under those conditions, there can be no waivers. They've got to follow city standards completely. And so I do not have the concerns, especially with the engineer and the developer that are involved in this project. Their previous work in this community has been top-notch, and they have listened to residents. I can empathize with people living in the area because we were out in a rural area for many, many years until we were surrounded. But that's part of the growth of the city of Lincoln. And I think actually this does increase some of the protection for Wilderness Park.
I'm going to go ahead and comment on all three. Our job here is to look at land use, and I empathize with over 50 people giving us letters in opposition, and the Wilderness Park is a wonderful place, and the history and all of the diversity there, it's beautiful, and I think we all enjoy it, bike rides and walking and enjoying all of the different features. And I'll just share a quick little story. My daughter, who just gets exposed to things through her school and teaching, she takes me over there because it's something new that she's experienced. And so those are really fun things, and I do appreciate everything you do with Wilderness Park and all of your support of it. The things that we have to look at, though, as a board, we have to really appreciate and respect all of the people, but we also have to appreciate what our staff has worked on with this. So from that, I am supporting the comprehensive plan. I'm supporting the annexation, and from a change of zone standpoint, this does fall into place with what we're doing with the conditions. And like Dick, my fellow commissioner, mentioned, those things are very important to trying to protect and moving this park into an area that will be at least protected from this developer. Okay?
Rich.
I'm torn on this one. As Commissioner Joy mentioned, our hands are kind of dealt to us. The planning department tells us whether this checks the boxes, and it seems to. As Dick mentioned, that they can't ask for waivers now. They have to apply through the planning department and through codes to do things according to the book. I am very familiar with the applicants and their reputation. I'm sure they'll do a good job. But I love Wilderness Park, and if this does anything to detract from it, I don't know how we could forgive ourselves. You know, the traffic, the testimony about how this whole area is sacred, flooding, light, traffic, and especially the ecology and the wildlife. We hear from a lot of NIMBYs, not in my backyard people, but in this case, this is the backyard to thousands of people that use Wilderness Park. And so I'm torn. I'm not sure yet how I'll vote.
So I too empathize with everyone who came and appreciate coming out and speaking to us and voicing your concern. But I personally think that it is an interesting project. One, coming into the city from off of 80 to 77, it's an entryway to seeing, residential city, part of the city. I don't necessarily have the perspective of probably the majority, but when you have precious green space and park space and residential around it, there's a cherishment and value, to that. And I've seen property values increase because of that sacred space, right? That we will all use and love. And so I do think as the city grows around this type of green space and specifically the park, we will see, values of homes and people using that property in different ways. So that's pretty exciting. I think that the big thing for me is that waiver, but to Commissioner Dick's point, I think with our planning department and the way they have laid it out for us, they will really appropriately look at all the codes for making sure that this development goes the right way. But I also would say that the developer, this is a preliminary plan that was put out, And, there's opportunities for change, right? I do question some of the traffic patterns, right, that was laid out and how that may impact based on things that are happening with, the highway, but there's still an opportunity to influence that. So, use that opportunity to have those conversations while those plans are being worked out. But overall, I am, supportive of moving forward.
Well, like Rich, I am ambivalent about this. On the one hand, I recognize that according to our existing comprehensive plan, that this project is in keeping with our comprehensive plan. On the other hand, as someone who is passionate about green space and particularly Wilderness Park, I hike there often with my dogs. I just feel, I come from a big city. I come from New York City. Parks are a refuge, and this is Lincoln's park. It's not just a neighborhood park. It is a legacy to the entire city of Lincoln. And I worry about encroachment. I worry that one development leads to another development, and now all we have abutting onto Wilderness Park is berms and fences and ugly sight lines where there was once prairie. So I share Rich's ambivalence as someone who also lived on an acreage for many years. I understand how much you appreciate the vista and how much you appreciate having that space to just look at a sunset or look at a sunrise, watch the birds hovering and swooping by. So I am extremely torn, but ultimately I'll vote my conscience.
I don't know how to vote either. That's just what it is. I love Wilderness Park. It's been a struggle recently because it's not as accessible as it used to be for me and my wheels. But my kids go there often. They're always saying, hey, we're driving out there. You want to hang out for a bit while we go hiking up a couple miles, whatever it takes. I love the idea of a city surrounded by urban. I love that this long, huge stretch of land is marked. We're not going to build in a floodplain. Most of it is floodplain. It's going to remain a park. I know we're spreading out. Lincoln continues to grow, and at some point, will that entire Wilderness Park be surrounded on both sides by a city? Probably. And what's the best way to do that? I don't have all the answers. Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't have a right answer.
Dick.
One of the things that's brought me to being supportive of this is the fact that this plan is a very well laid out plan that's actually offering that buffer. But if we don't pass this, the bishop has already indicated they're willing to sell. There could be a lot worse things being brought forward to us than a good housing development. So I think we should consider that.
Now, go ahead.
The one thing that, from my standpoint as being on the planning commission, is we need to look at it from a land use standpoint, and we need to maintain the focus and stay consistent. So from that standpoint, and again, we make a lot of decisions based on the public, that we share their views, we share their passion. And so it's very important also to take what they say, because we represent them. And so listening to all of our discussions here, it does give angst to how I want to vote too. However, I'm going to stay in line with staff-supported information and use there, and try to take back my view from the developer or those types of things, and try to look at it from that standpoint. Rich.
And I just want to reiterate, however this goes, the applicant can appeal it to the city council, or you folks can also file within 14 days and have a hearing before the city council. And so I'm not sure how it's going to go, but
Wait a
so
second.
Right,
way
it's
to
not
go.
final
Tim's round-
action, so
Tim's
it's
round
just,
is
no,
not
yeah.
final action.
This is not final action, the vote today is only a recommendation to
Right.
the city council.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes, people can either way go to the city council meeting and be heard before the city council, but we are not taking final action
Yeah,
today.
Because right, sometimes we have a special permit community unit plan in front of you, and that could be final action. This is a change of zone, a PUD, so there's, sorry, a little difference, very similar, but as a change of zone, it has to go to the city council. I would also note that if you do have 5 votes today, one way or the other, it doesn't immediately necessarily go to the city council. We'll let people know when the city council date is set, because there is an annexation agreement that would need to go with it. So it wouldn't immediately
not
go to
immediately.
city council, but nobody needs to appeal it one way or the other. Once you have made a recommendation that has at least 5 people with it, we will then work with the developer to finish up the annexation agreement, and then it would be scheduled at city council, and we will certainly let everybody know, so there's no surprise on what that date, but it would be at least 19 days from now at the very earliest, probably most likely beyond that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Adam had a question. He
I just
might
have a real quick question. Is
procedural.
Tracy with us, or?
No, I'm sorry, Tracy had to leave, so she, yeah, and I don't.
What would a quorum be then for the group?
It's
Five.
5 votes, one direction or the other, but you have to have 5. If it's split, then it comes back the next meeting for an additional vote until there are 5 votes, one direction or the other. And we are missing 2 members actually today, but we do have enough to take action. The way things are currently written, I've heard a couple people mention that, the setback, the fence, the berm, that is actually just a discussion item. That's not actually, that would have to be an amendment, right, to this before it was voted to approve.
The 10 feet buffer, does that need to be?
Yes, when you come to the vote on the change of zone PUD, as a part of the motion to approve it, or as a separate motion to amend, you could add in the 10-foot buffer that would have a 6-foot high opaque fence and landscaping, because that currently is not a condition of the PUD.
Right. I just want to make sure people are aware. We're discussing all 3. The motion is only for the first item right now, which is the comprehensive plan amendment. But when we get to that, I just don't want people to think that because we discussed it today, it's already included. It is not. It would require that amendment.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, over 50 letters was a significant action, which I think shows how much people care about this piece of our community and how important it is. I too am somebody who our family has spent time there. I love being out there. I have a great horned owl that lives in my in the common area behind my backyard, and I worry every time the people across from us turn on their floodlights for their whole backyard. I don't know what they're doing back there, but I'm scared that our owls will leave. So far, it looks good for another set of owlets this year, so I understand the appeal for all of those things. And I do share the concern about what this could do to that space and what that means for us. However, at least specifically with the comprehensive plan amendment, this is a piece that has been designated previously. So, yeah, this makes it very difficult. Do we have other discussion on this first item?
Are you speaking only to the planning commission?
Yes.
Yes. None for me.
Okay, Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Hoare. Oh, she is not here. Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
No.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1.
I would move that we approve Annexation 21013.
Second, Paul.
Is there additional discussion on the annexation piece at this time?
Now, the annexation just brings all of those properties into the city,
Correct.
and they do not have to connect unless they're within a certain distance. We discussed all that. Okay,
Sewer
I
needs
have
to
no
be
other questions.
Under 300 feet.
Sewer would have.
Right, except
They're
unless
within
it's within a
300
certain
feet of
amount
the
of.
sewer,
Yeah.
and they need to connect to that, otherwise no.
Okay.
Steve, point of question, when there are people here who have additional questions, is that something that, because we've already closed the public hearing, I'm just asking
Correct.
how-
At this point, the public hearing is closed, so if people have questions, they can ask questions of staff afterwards, or if they have additional comments. That could be something that could be submitted to the city council if this goes to the city council. But yes, at this point, it is just planning commission discussion with any questions you may have of staff. So there's no testimony from the public, nor is there any testimony from the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. All right, Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
I would also move to approve change of zone 21057 with an amendment to provide that a berm be developed with a 6-foot wooden fence, and that there be landscaping added to the 10-foot easement that would be developed outside the fence.
Could we just say opaque fence rather than wooden? So
Yeah.
they can make it
Opaque
brick.
fence is fine.
They can make
Okay,
it
he
brick.
accepts that. Okay, so that is the motion. We need a second.
Second, Paul.
Okay, additional discussion on the motion on the floor.
We vote on the amendment or the,
Well, his motion included that, so
Okay,
it is
that's
not
right.
a separate, that is the motion on the floor, includes that additional
Got it.
language.
If we approve this, I really like that we put the 10-foot in there. I don't so much love the fence. That's just me. Because many people testified, what is a 6-foot fence necessarily going to do? I think in almost a lot of newer districts are actually removing fences so that the wildlife can flow more freely without having to jump. I know a deer can jump a 6-foot fence, seen it happen. But that's just,
Can I make one clarification? Dick said with a 10-foot easement. I think actually what the applicant was offering was a 10-foot outlot.
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 Yeah, so just if that's
I
okay with
misspoke.
both.
It should be 10-foot outlot.
Yes, okay, thank you.
yeah.
Thanks for
Friendly
pointing
amendment
that out.
accepted, yes.
That was all I had to say.
Okay. Anything additional? Okay, no, Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
no.
Ryman Yost.
Wait, Cruz?
Oh, Cruz,
No.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-2.
At this time, anyone speaking on an item not on the agenda may do so. Not, a motion for adjournment?
So move. Edens?
Second, Rodenberg.
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yeah.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned.